trees.
Noon. We're scheduled for 3 hours today.
Yes. Yes, we are.
So we'll go as fast as we can, I promise. It's just that we love spending time with you. We're already not looking forward to the day when you leave. How many more policies do we have? Do you know?
Well, what do you have? The 5s, 6s, 7s, 8s, and 9s.
Okay.
So the 5s are like an average size section. The 7s are really big. I'll probably break that into two. We always break that one into 2 parts. And then the 8s and 9s, they're actually both pretty small though. So those you should get through quickly.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Mr. Wildebohr is here. Okay. It is 9:02. I would like to call this meeting of the New Hanover County Policy Committee into order. Could you please call the roll, Ms. Kim? I'll do it. I can call the roll. Ms. Craybill?
Here.
Mr. Wildebohr?
Present.
And I am here. All right, next on our agenda will be an approval of the agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve?
A motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Ms. Craybill, how do you vote?
Can we have a little discussion? Oh, I'm sorry, never mind. Yes, vote yes. Sorry.
Okay.
Got ahead of myself.
Mr. Wildebohr, how do you vote?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Next on the agenda is an approval of the minutes. The minutes have been attached. I hope you've had a chance to look at them. At this time, I will entertain a motion to approve.
I'll motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any conversation?
Yes, I had a quick conversation a quick question. I'm looking down through the non-voting members, and there is a person at the bottom, Courtney Kiba, a community member. And I don't see her on this chat, so I didn't know if she was a regular member or if she was an invited member for that specific meeting.
I know we spoke about this. I don't remember her being at any meeting or speaking, so I don't. Ms. Dagner, do you have any information on that? Do we know who she is?
I don't know who she is, and I don't recall seeing her.
Okay, McKenna?
Yeah, that was one time someone had used my computer, and she had logged into Zoom. So when I logged in, it was her name, and then I had to change it.
Oh, so that's you.
Okay. Yeah. It was me. I just logged
all right.
under the wrong Zoom account.
Then should I amend my motion to accept the minutes and strike this person as an attendee?
Yes, she should not be included as an attendee.
Okay, then I would like to amend my motion to accept the minutes as amended to strike Courtney Kiva from the attendance roster.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Ms. Crable, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Wildebohr, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Motion is agreed to. And now, let's get down to business with our policy updates from the NCSBA. We will begin with a policy that Ms. Justice has asked that we look at. It is policy 2300 pertaining to board minutes. Is that okay? Can we go in that order? The order that they were received in the packet?
That'd be great. Mine were received backwards, but I reorganized them. So I will go in the order that they are written on our agenda. That would be helpful.
Okay. So let's scroll down. We'll start there and then move our way back up. Actually, is that one? Yes. Okay, excellent. All right, so the board as a corporate body may transact business only at official meetings of the board. Ms. Justice has asked that we reschedule or redefine our policy to permanently add a regular meeting on the third Tuesday, or make permanent the interim meetings on the third Tuesday of the month. Ms. Stagner, are there any problems with doing so?
The board can certainly schedule a second meeting to a second monthly meeting to occur at a certain time. I would just say that if you do schedule a second regular meeting to occur at a particular time, and if you need to change that, you would need to give the 48 hours notice for a special meeting.
Okay.
I'd like to throw in, if I can, I don't know if this is what I'm supposed to be doing, but, I think we should poll the board just to see, I've talked to a couple of board members and they said that, well, there might be a better day, is I guess the way I would look at it, maybe a Thursday versus a Tuesday. So what do you think?
So I know we have talked about that over the last 2 years, several times. Every time we run up either against another conflict, not just the city council meeting, or I think there's a statutory problem with regards to our expulsion and student appeal hearings, employee hearings, and things like this. I think does they have to be done as close as possible to the meeting? I don't know, Ms. Stagner, if you're aware of what I'm speaking. I know this was our guidance from our former attorney.
So I'm not sure exactly what context you're talking about. So if you need to have an employee hearing or a student hearing on some kind of an appeal, you have a separate policy to deal with that. That can be scheduled as a special meeting, or it can be done in conjunction with a different meeting. It should, there are timelines that are set for those appeals to occur.
Well, I was told the timeline was the first Thursday after that first meeting of the month.
I'm not familiar with that requirement.
Okay, great.
Well, here are my thoughts on that. First of all, Mr. Wildebohr and Mr. Boyer, Ms. Justice requested to have our second interim meeting be on a Thursday and not on a Wednesday. And maybe I misheard that wrong. But my opinions on this is I personally think that we need 2 meetings a month right now, but I would not want to put that into policy like the county commissioners have listed that they always have 2 meetings, and the city council lists that they always have 2 meetings. I don't know that I'm ready to commit, full time forever, to 2 meetings, like the first and the third Tuesday as listed in our policy right now. And I definitely don't, if we were to do that, I definitely don't want to move it to a different day of the week. And I certainly don't want to disadvantage any of the community members that want to attend, regular council meetings and county commissioner meetings. But if those folks are so inclined, then I just feel like they're going to have to do what I've done, for many years, and many of us have done, is you're going to have to look at their agendas and you're going to have to pick, which one you want to go to. And if some of the people in the community feel very strongly about this, then I feel like they should petition the city council to move their meetings. But I feel like I'm responsible for the Board of Education and the school system, and don't feel like I need to change our meetings around that. So that's what my opinion is on that.
Well, I would tend to agree. I think we've established a consistency over many years, and our parents and teachers expect our meetings to be on Tuesday. I'll also say that you end up bumping up against other stuff, left, right, and center when you move it. So, Thursday might sound good, Wednesday might sound good. It always
Wednesday
conflicts.
we have to steer away from, in my opinion, because that is a recognized church night, for many of our families, and the PTAs and booster clubs have traditionally steered away from Wednesday night as well. So I certainly wouldn't want to conflict with people's, ability to attend their church services and activities.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I do think that most months we need that second meeting. My hope is that through good governance, we can schedule it on our own, because if you write it into policy, and you don't need one or want one, and this happens often in the summer months when things aren't quite as busy.
But our policy already says that
Yeah.
our interim meetings, if we're calling it an interim meeting straight up, then the policy says interim meetings will occur on the third Tuesday of the month as needed.
Yes.
So I don't want to change the policy.
Okay.
And I have the only person I've heard from directly that wants to change that policy is Ms. Justice. I haven't. And so I don't know, if Hugh and Stephanie, who are are here, can weigh in, but if it's supposed to come from the policy, then you, me, and Pete take our best, or make our best recommendation to the board. So is that how it works?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, I am inclined to agree with you. I would not recommend a change at this time, but.
Hey, Chair Bollier, may I please speak?
Yeah, of course.
I agree with you. I don't necessarily believe that it needs to be built into policy, being that we have, this is Stephanie, by the way, or Adams. I believe that as long as we have the policy availability to put an interim meeting on or a special meeting on as needed, I'm comfortable with that. Just my thoughts.
I agree.
Yeah, I'm in agreement also. I think that's probably the best way to do it, because it gives us our flexibility.
Okay.
I mean, we definitely need them now, but like I say, over the summer or something, we may not, and it would be more advantageous to have that flexibility.
Yeah. And then we have to change our policy again. So we're not about changing policies right and left. I don't think. I think we should get them and follow them.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
So so Nelson, explain how that works. Do we just put that aside and say, this is what we're recommending?
Yeah, we discussed it. We'll just recommend no change.
And then just send that on to the next board meeting.
No, it won't go on to the next board meeting, because we're not doing anything to the policy. I mean, we can discuss it.
Okay.
Well, when I give a committee report, I'll discuss it then, but
Okay, gotcha.
yeah, we're not going to vote on it because there's nothing to vote on.
No, I just wanted to make sure I understood how it went going forward.
Okay.
All right.
One down.
Just so everybody knows, this has become a monthly thing, but I have one of those jobs that require me to, work. Not that this isn't work. This is play. This is fun. I will have to step out for a few minutes, just 15 minutes or so, to give an assignment and take attendance. But I feel free to continue on without me. I know with a quorum, we can continue to do business. That's correct, Ms. Dagner?
If we have 2 of the 3 committee members, you should be able to continue discussions.
Great. Okay, let's move on to policy 4720, surveys of students.
Wait a minute, you're going backwards.
No,
What's
that's it. 4720 should be next.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. That's not how the agenda do it.
They're listed, the policies themselves are listed in reverse order from what the listing is.
In the
So if you'll
agenda, right?
scroll-
It
It might be easier to go in numerical order because some of the policies build on each other. So if we can go to the top of the listed agenda, Kim, can you scroll down or scroll up?
Yes.
Yeah, did you want to finish the 4,300 since we had already started those last month?
Sure. So do you want to begin at policy 4300, student behavior policies?
Yes, that's a good idea.
Give me a second. 4300?
Yeah, because I read them backwards, and then it turns out that they referred to a lot of ones before, and so I got myself confused, and it took me a little bit longer to go back. But it's nothing I can't handle with a little bit of my math skills that I learned.
Don't worry about it. We got to do them all anyway. All right. Policy 4300, student behavior policies. Ms. Varnum, are you with us this lovely morning?
Good morning, I'm here.
I would love for you to lead us off on this policy.
Okay, let's see. McKenna and I actually had some conversation via email about a little bit of language in this one. McKenna, is the one on the screen updated with the language that you had, that one sentence maybe?
Yeah, added
Okay.
stuff to D.
Okay, where we had, because this one we did already talk about. There was just some wording, there we go. D, under consequences for violation, added consistent with the school justice partnership. And that's that multi-agency, interagency signed agreement on a graduated response system and the tiered supports that we have with really to limit that school to prison pipeline. Other than that, I can go through it for new members if you want me to.
Well,
Can I throw a couple questions in?
Yeah, while we were talking about that section right there on the consistent with school justice partnership, is that the official name of it? Because that was one of my questions. Is this the interagency MOU that we have? So is that the official name, or do we need to have some more words around so people really understand what this is talking about?
I agree.
So you could, let me pull up a copy of it real quick to get the title.
Yeah.
Because it does say interagency governance agreement, and then it refers to itself as both. Let me pull
Can
up
we put both in there then, just so that people don't get confused and we don't, and new people wouldn't get confused?
I think that's a good idea. I had the same question, so I agree.
But do we want
Okay.
to add the name of the organization if we don't continue with it? Something we'd have to go back in and change the policy.
So it was, do you want me to pop it up on the screen real quick?
Yeah,
To
that'd
show
be
the front
helpful, just as
page?
a reminder.
Okay. I can't do it.
Or if you just tell us, I mean, I trust that you can read what's on your screen.
Hi now, Ms. Farnham.
There we go. Thank you. Here you go. This is, it is a school justice partnership agreement, but ours is titled Interagency Governance Agreement on the Handling of School Offenses. So-
Mr. Billy, if I might weigh in, I think that this is, School Justice Partnerships was a statewide initiative of the administrative Office of the Courts and others who, suggested this, and it went out to all the different judicial districts in the state for local school districts to negotiate their own MOUs with local law enforcement and others. And I think the common name that it's understood as across the state is school justice partnership. At least if you talk to any school attorney and you say school justice partnership, they know exactly what you mean. If you say interagency governance agreement, I'm not sure that, we might scratch our heads a little bit. I can't speak to what members of the community do, but I know one of my colleagues does a lot of training on this for SROs, et cetera. And I think that she would refer to it as school justice partnership. I think that's what SROs understand. So just to the extent that's helpful.
Okay, well, and so then to that point, when we're looking down on the last page, page 4 of 4, when it says legal references, and the last in red, it says dash 397.1. Is that what you're referring to, the school justice partnership?
Let me pull up that statute real quick. I don't know that.
Because that would make sense if that's what you added.
That isn't that one, but I will let Deborah respond.
Yeah.
I sadly have my book on my desk too.
You are so good, Julie. I'm loving pulling off that Bible off the
That's not the school justice partnership. McKenna, do you know if there's a document that we could reference in the legal references for the school justice partnership initiative?
I don't know of any. I mean, I can look for one, but I don't know of any off the top of my head.
Well, I don't want to make it really hard. I know that if I was a little bit confused, then, and I know what the interagency agreement is, that's one thing. But if people who don't know, but I obviously don't want to make us have to revisit our policy every time we change something. So I'm good with that, as long as, at least I understand it.
I do have some questions about the wording up top. The introduction to the policy. Is there any way that we could add with student behavior policies are provided in order to expect standards of behavior, something about ensure equitable treatment of our students? Discipline is a huge issue for equity. I don't know if we even, I was actually thinking about taking 4351 and having the equity committee look at that in conjunction with somebody from policy. But just at least something here to say that, we really want equitable treatment when it comes to student behavior policies.
I mean, that makes sense to me to, have that in there, and we want to be as equitable as possible with everyone.
And I don't know if you printed these off, Nelson, but I printed off some commentary from the community. And so wherever this would go in school and out of school suspensions, this is.
Yeah, that's covered really in depth under a separate policy. 4351 deals exclusively with short-term suspensions. So I'm sure we'll have a broader conversation about that. But at least for 4300, excuse me?
Is this a place where we want to reference like we do in other policies?
It is. It's already, it's referenced here. 4351 is referenced within this policy.
It is?
Yes.
Okay.
If I could ask a couple questions on L, restitution, where it says may not be imposed on students who are unable to pay. I'm just, thinking about the way that's worded, and a 6-year-old is not going to be able to pay. So we're saying that we would never do that to us. I think we need to put something in there about the parents are responsible for it.
Where are you talking, Pete? I don't have an L in mine.
It's a new one. It's under K, community service and restitution. And then it says may not be imposed on students who are unable to pay.
But can we actually, and I guess this is a legal question, can we invoke that on a parent to make them pay, or is that something that they have to do at the court systems?
Well, I think of a situation, that I've seen and heard of, like a student gets on a bus, tears up a seat, that child's not gonna be able to, I don't think any child's gonna be able to pay for it. So why is why is it even in there if you're gonna say that no child's gonna be able to pay? Typically you go to the parent and say, your child tore up the seat and we'd like you to pay for it. If they say absolutely not, then we have to go on to something else. But most parents, I think, if their child, especially if they've done it in a malicious manner, tend to say, yeah, I guess my child did mess up, and then you're able to get that restitution. But how many children are going to, honestly, how many, even a 15-year-old probably will not be able to pay.
But can we force them at the school district to pay? That's, I guess, the legal question that I have.
Right. So there is a statute, and I'm trying to find right now, that talks about parents being responsible for damage to school property, and that may be what Mr. Wildebor's talking about. I'm not familiar with using restitution as a consequence, a behavior consequence. And so, that's a little unusual for me. And I don't know that requiring a parent to provide reimbursement for damages to school property really falls under student punishment or student consequences. So
I see that was added. Can we strike it?
I think that was part of your existing policy, and that's maybe why it's added in this one.
I think I'm confused because I didn't, my policy 4300 ends with E.
This is in section D.
Huh?
This is section D1L.
Okay, I thought somebody said, okay, I didn't hear your D, Pete, when you said D1L. Sorry.
No problem.
All right, I will temporarily step away. I'll be back in like 15 minutes. If we could hold off on 4316 until I get back, that'd be great.
Are we going to continue to talk about the student behaviors? This 4300?
I guess so. That
Okay.
makes sense to me.
Yeah, all right. So Pete, you go ahead and make your comments, and then I'll make mine or add.
Okay. Well, so again, that was the restitution one. And then if we go down to O, exclusion from extracurricular activities, but there's no term. So is it forever? Is it for that season? Is it for that game? Does it matter? I guess, is that up to the principal to say, or the administrator who's invoking this punishment? Because my concern there is, at Ashley High School, well, the principal is kind of a real, tough guy. So he says, well, if you mess up, you're done for the season. And you got the same, you go to Laney, and I'm just saying, I don't know, I know the people, but anyway, at Laney High School, they have it and say, well, if it's, I'm just going to sit you out for 2 practices or something. So, I mean, without any further definition or clause in there, it worries me that it could be anywhere and everywhere.
And extracurricular also applies to clubs. It's not just sports.
True. Very true. Or, it could be band, could be, anything. It could be marching band. We take them out of marching band for, and then you, with that, you run into, well, what happens if that's part of their in-school grade? I mean, another concern there. I mean, my thought, I've always been a very, and I guess there is some area for this, but I mean, to just put that out like that, it seems to me a lot of times that coach is the one that is able to keep that child on the straight and narrow most times. So if we sit there and then you have a conflict between the coach and the administration, because the coach says, hey, he's done so much better, or she's done so much better this year. But we turn around and say, well, the administrator says, well, you know what? I'm sorry, he's out for the rest of the season because he, had a cigarette on campus or whatever it may be.
Would it be appropriate for me to weigh in on that a little bit,
Please.
Mr. Wilford?
Sure. Absolutely.
So this policy, the types of consequences that can be imposed. So you also have in-school suspension, community service, that suspension from bus privileges. None of those have a time set either. So it would be up to the principal to determine that that consequence and the length of time of that consequence. Some of them, such as disciplinary reassignment or placement in an alternative school, would require also, to go up to the superintendent level to make a recommendation on those. So this is really a list of the types of consequences, and it would be up to the principal or another administrator to make the recommendation as to the scope or the length of those consequences.
Okay, so the kind of along those same lines, Deborah, all right, so I'm reading through, we're talking about the consequences for we're listing minor violation. Like there's wording up there that says examples of minor violations, which to me are minor, inappropriate, disrespectful language, that kind of stuff. And then, but when we're listing some of the consequences, they really just don't even seem to match. Like, would we ever put graduation exclusion from a graduation ceremony because of a minor, violation? So I guess my thought was, do we need to move some of those out of minor violation consequences, especially when, if you go back to B, it says that a school shall create a student behavior management plan. To elaborate further, I'm kind of back where Pete was, where you've got one principal, invoking like, the harshest you can get for a minor, and another principal not. So, Dr. Faust, maybe you can weigh in on that. I mean, this is one of those things that I think we need to have some uniformity across the board and not let principals do whatever they want, because then we got people getting punished or consequences that don't match the crime.
So a lot of it, so when invoking the privilege by looking at this, it gives principals a range. It's not necessarily that they jump right to the end. Our hope would be that, they have built that relationship, or they've done the research and found out, well, why are you, for instance, we'll use exclusion from graduation. I'm thinking, there may be a time where the kids, let's say they throw eggs in the cafeteria. They egg the cafeteria. That's right. Minor. However, the consequence for those seniors who did that could be exclusion from graduation ceremonies. So it ranges this just gives us the avenue, but that doesn't mean that they go down that one. They have several to choose from.
Okay.
Dr. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you on that. I just really worry on some of the site-based decisions where I'm throwing eggs in my high school and you're throwing eggs in your high school, and I don't get to go to graduation, and you have to pick up pine cones in the parking lot. That that just bothers me.
I'm not laughing at you. It was funny. Pine cones in the parking lot.
So if I can add in to kind of echo what Dr. Faust was saying, also this policy, based on my understanding, is really kind of the framework that heads into the rest of the 4300s, and the rest of the 4300s kind of define a little bit more closely the responses for certain types of behaviors. But everything all these policies go back to the piece of, and I've got it right here, the student code of conduct or student handbook and the student behavior management system that each school has to develop, that will then really identify minor offenses and then the responses to those, and then more significant and then critical. And so I think it's important to have that in, but as a behavior specialist, I'm more comfortable with a broader policy that allows the range and continuum of responses, because each behavior incident isn't really just defined by what it was, like throwing eggs. There's really a function of behavior, and our role isn't to provide and I'm sorry, kind of standing on a little bit of a soapbox for a second. Our role isn't to necessarily be judicious or have a punitive response or disciplinary response. It's really to decrease the likelihood that that misbehavior reoccurs. And depending upon the nature of that behavior and the function of that behavior, some egg throwing has one function, some egg throwing has another function. One is I'm impulsive and I had eggs, and the other one is I'm putting egg on your face.
I'm going to peg you in the head. Yeah.
And so you would want a different response based on the function of the behavior, because our role is to decrease the likelihood that that behavior reoccurs. So from my internal perspective, I think the range is really helpful, but I think that this policy can't stand alone without that student management system or plan for each school, and then also continuous professional development on responding to student behaviors in order to decrease the likelihood that they reoccur.
Okay, I get that. Completely get that. So one last thing, I was trying to find a list of serious violations that, just kind of like we did the minor violations, we listed them up in the verbiage, and I don't see any. It just says serious violations that can threaten the safety. So what does that mean? Like, an egg to the temple, thrown hard, could kill somebody. But, are we talking knives, weapons, bombs, swords, show and tell items that could possibly be, the grenade I bought at the thrift store and I bring it in. So how are we, shouldn't we put some of those like what ifs in there, such as like we did in minors? Include but not limited to kind of things?
Bill, I think those are included in the other policies of the 4300 series. And Julie, I think, has just located some of them.
No, and I agree. I mean, and I read a lot of those things in other policies, but if people, if students and parents are just looking, initially when their kids in all kinds of trouble, this would be the place that they go to say, all right, now I know I did it wrong, and here are some of the other places I can go to. If we took the time to list minor, I think we should take the time to list major, serious.
And I would agree. And even in the minor section, it worries me that we have minor physical altercations. Does that mean two people are just pushing each other? But is that a fight? If two people are squared off punching each other, is that called a minor? Because it may not involve a weapon or an injury. Two people might get in a fight. So where, again, we have so much ambiguity in this whole thing. It's like, I don't know. Where does a fight list? Is it a serious violation or minor violation? And I understand that in my years, two kids could be pushing each other, and that's, to me, that'd be a minor violation. We've always, I've always looked at a fight, I got my fist clenched, I'm punching somebody in the nose, as a fight, and that's a serious violation and treated that way. But I could, if I was a parent trying to defend my child, I could say, well, that was a minor physical altercation because there was no weapon, and neither of the children really ended up with a major injury. So unfortunately, we're putting more and more question marks in this policy instead of more and more, as a parent, if I'm coming in to say, well, why are you suspending my child for 10 days? Oh, it's a minor. In my consideration, it's a minor file, so why I guess my question is, why doesn't it say this is what happens when two children are in a fight? I mean, and I'm sure it does in other places, but I agree with Stephanie. I think if this is the policy that's going to encapsulate everything, it should, in some form or fashion, encapsulate it, or at least give us for more definitions, please see policy 43, whatever.
So I don't want to jump in too much, but I would say a couple of things. So this is a framework. This is the initial framework policy that you cannot look at this one in isolation because it just sets the stage for the following policies. If you look under serious violations, it does specifically list firearms, explosive devices, weapons, bomb threats, terrorist threats. So those things are listed. And if you go to the cross-reference, it says 4300 series. My concern is, and I certainly understand that you want to be able to ensure that this is clear for both families and for administrators, but my concern is, as the board attorney who is going to be helping the administration and maybe principals interpret this policy, is that if you try to put everything in one policy, then you've made it more complicated when you do have other policies that are set specifically to fill in those questions that you are asking. But I'll, again, defer to the administrators who are going to be working with this policy day in and day out.
Would it be, thank you for that. And would it, to kind of answer the questions on page 4 of 4, where we're in the section of serious violations, would it help for that sentence that's in the middle of that paragraph where it starts with further information regarding the standards and procedures? Would it help if it was further information regarding the violations, standards and procedures for long-term suspension, 365s, expulsion, short-term, long-term, all those, and then you see the policies listed, but be clear that the violations, there's more information on the violations, the standards and procedures in each of these next policies, because when we start looking at, and I love that Deborah can just read my face and see that I found something. In looking at especially policy 4353, it really goes much further into determination of appropriate consequence, which is a pretty important section that's related to the investigation piece, the culpability. And so it's really not just listing this behavior leads to this consequence or response. It's how do we determine the culpability related to the behavior, and it goes deeper. And so I think that that's really helpful in that one. So would it help for that sentence to just mention that more information on the violations can also be found in those?
Because I have that highlighted in my notes. Certain violations involving firearms or explosive devices may result. I mean, if you have a firearm, are you getting suspended, or are you not? Those are just some basic things, is that you can't bring a gun on campus, and not get suspended. I mean, that's just, and so to put may there is, I don't know, I guess maybe you still have to look and see, maybe the gun was for show and tell and it wasn't loaded and a kid made a mistake. I mean, so I know we have to allow for that kind of stuff too, but.
Or maybe someone else brought the gun and put it in my backpack while I wasn't looking because they didn't want to get caught, but I'm the one in possession.
Right. So, all right. So I see that. I just am feeling like we spent in this policy that we spent way more time listing out specifics of minor violations. And when those are the ones that we can really change behaviors on and do exactly what you said, get to the root of the problem. And in the major ones, we've just left it to, hey, go check these 5 other policies to see if they apply. And so that was my whole point on that.
And I'm going to be like Julie and get back on my soapbox. I still would like, and I don't know if I can make a motion or whatever else, but I think that I've been on both sides of the equation with this one, but the exclusion from extracurricular activities, I don't think that should be a normal punishment for, and that's what it is. That's what it would be. It would be a punishment. If a coach, on the other hand, in collaboration with the administrator, says, he or she's been in trouble this many times, we're gonna take them off the team. That's, I think, but I mean, I still don't think that should, yes, that is a privilege for you to be representing your school, and the coach hopefully understands that as well as the administrator. But I think just all right, as being the frontline punishment, which it could be, we're going to take, Johnny off the team or suspend Johnny for 2 weeks, just because, for whatever, I don't think that should be in this list. So I think that, I don't know if I can make a motion or how that works, but I think that the what I have is listed O needs to be removed.
Well, Pete, from my understanding that we don't make motions on any of these. We either send it forward for everybody to look at, or we keep it back for us to look at again. Is that right?
So the committee has to reach an agreement on the policies that will be sent forward, and that includes, I mean, the way it's been done since I've been sitting with this committee is that there's a consensus reached on language in a specific policy, and then at the end, the vote is to send specific policies as they've been agreed upon by the committee forward to the whole board for review. So if there's a consensus along with Mr. Wildeboer to remove that language, that would be what the version is that the committee votes on at the end. And so you may want to wait until Mr. Billiard gets back.
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest. Let's put this at the bottom of the pile and come back.
Okay.
One last thing that I wanted to see if we could possibly add, if this makes sense, in the minor violations list is, I don't know, where we are in using restorative justice, circles or those kind of things. Would that be an appropriate response? The consequence? I mean, I don't want to ever call it a consequence, to be in it yet. So it would be listed maybe, PQ, or I mean, put down somewhere. It almost, I don't know where it would fall in. I don't know what work service is. Like, are we sending a kid to the cafeteria, or are we sending a kid to the parking lot to pick up pine cones? Is that what that means? And then, or is that like a placement in an alternative school?
Are we a restorative justice district? Has everyone been trained on restorative justice practices?
I don't know. That's what I'm asking.
Not everyone, but that is a part of the premise of the school justice partnership, and is certainly in line with many of the projects that we have going on regarding student behavior.
So could we add that in? And because again, if we're not directly correlating, behavior consequence, that's just another one that we can choose from, especially as we get better at managing that or get trained up on it. Would it make sense to add that in as another option?
I think that it's kind of like, it would almost be kind of titling a certain type of response, which I think, and I want Deborah to jump in, or McKenna or Dr. Faust, but the restorative justice really can work on community service pieces, the parts at the top, such as student conferences, behavior contracts, instruction in conflict resolution and anger management. All of that is encompassed in restorative justice practices. And so if we want to mention that, I think that's fine. I don't know that I have a problem with it. I just think that it, just like we don't mention positive behavior supports, but all these things are a part of those. So I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in. Deborah, McKenna, Dr. Faust.
I'm not sure. I agree with Julie. I'm not sure that restorative justice is a punishment or a consequence. Although having a policy or a reference to restorative justice at some point would be, I think, perfectly acceptable. I don't remember offhand where else it might go that might make sense. McKenna may be able to weigh in on that.
And so what if it could be listed as, because again, and I do want to clarify that this list is not about minor offenses. This is not the list of minor violations. This is the list of responses. And it does say other disciplinary measures or responses that may include or but are not limited to.
Right.
So
I would like to see it listed, just so that we are calling out that is an option for us. And then again, the principal defines what that looks like at his or her school. And just so it's there, And especially as we're talking about, equity at so many levels in our organization, the mere fact of having those words in there, I think keeps us focused with our eye on the prize of where are we now and where do we want to be? So just as another, like as letter number T would be, would make me feel better.
Miss Crable, I might point back up to section A, where it says principal.
Okay.
These are the sort of the overarching principles will be employed. So that may be a place to talk about restorative justice.
Yeah, and I'm fine. I mean, you guys are the wording experts. I just want it included, somewhere, if we can. So wherever it makes sense, that it's not buried in a paragraph that we can't find it, that makes it known, to us and our school system and our community that we value that as something that we're working on. So you tell me where it needs to go, and I will be happy.
All right, are we good with 4,300?
We're still there,
No.
Nelson. We had like a lot of talk. So Pete, go ahead and tell what your issue. I think we've got everything else added. Well, not everything else. We've got our questions answered, but Pete still had one pressing before we moved on.
Have you all actually agreed?
I'm back. Sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
There's been a lot of discussion, but I don't know exactly what was agreed upon. Like, are we removing the restitution and the extracurricular?
Those were the two that we were waiting for Nelson to come back on. Nelson, I had asked for, as one of the consequences for the minor violation in that list, to put something in there about maybe use restorative justice circles. Deborah suggested that it may be better listed under a principle. And the thought process behind that was that with all the equity discussion we have going on, that might help us stay focused with our eye on the prize of how we manage or approach some of our issues.
I would agree. I would think it would be better listed under principles.
Okay, and that's what and so however you think that needs to be worded, McKenna, to have that in there is fine. And then the other one, Nelson, that the Pete is
I'm back.
about is the exclusion from extracurricular activities as even a consequence.
And let me talk to you. Well, actually, that was one of the two that I had questions about. But one was, I think a lot of times, that the only person that's keeping that child safe, or not safe, but on the straight and narrow, a lot of times is that coach. They're working. I know when I was a coach, I knew about my students, and were my students perfect? Definitely. Were my athletes perfect? Definitely not. But I worked with them, and a lot of times, there was more concern from the child about having to face the coach at the end of the day than there was about so I think giving an administrator the first check that I can say, well, you just got in, you got into a skirmish with somebody, as it says up here, and it could be even a situation that somebody came up and pushed the athlete pushed back, they both get in trouble, the one kid gets ISS maybe, and then the other child maybe gets, hopefully there's not a different thing, but we're kicking them off the team. So I would like to remove O altogether, because I think that the coach and the administrator need that flexibility to be able to talk about it. And and I'm not saying children don't at some point need to be removed from a team, but I don't think that needs to be a consequence only coming from the administrator. I think that's something. Hopefully, there's communication between the coach and the principal or the assistant principal, and they can talk about that.
I don't think that this precludes a conversation from the coach and the AP. I mean, it could just be missing a game.
Well, it could be.
I think that those are conversations that Dr. Faust can have. I would keep it in there because I think there are situations where we would want somebody to miss a game.
And also we have to really, in my opinion, we have to keep in mind that extracurricular activities include other things besides sports, Like
sure.
suppose I'm on the science Olympiad team and, my behavior is not good. And they don't want me to travel because they don't know what I'm going to do. Or I'm disruptive. And so being in an extracurricular activity may not be. So I would be inclined to leave it as an option for all the reasons for other things that I said, let's do. If it's and Dr. Faust and Julie explained to us that they're just options, to try and deter further bad behavior. So I would be okay with leaving it in as an option. Case by case.
I'm gonna go back to, unfortunately, I've seen it way too many times used as the first line of defense. And so I disagree. And like I say, I think that the communication between the coach and the administrator, hopefully so I'm not saying it couldn't, a child couldn't be removed from a team or whatever else, but I don't think that right now, the way it's set up, administrator can say, hey, Mr. Coach or Mrs. Coach, so-and-so, so-and-so is out for, the rest of the season, say, for instance, because I'm holding them to a higher standard, which they should. But I don't think, and unfortunately, I've seen way too many times, and like I say, I just retired from being an administrator, so I've seen both sides of the equation. I've seen way too many times when an administrator says, I'm going to do it, and that's because it's on my list of things I can do. I'm going to do that. I'm going to, so anyway, I would like to see it removed. If you two are against that, then we'll just move on from there. My other question is restitution. As it's listed, it says may not be imposed on students who are unable to pay. And my question there, Nelson, is what student is, if a child tears up the back of a bus seat, when is a child ever going to be able to pay for that? I mean, you're not going to have.
I have no problem striking that.
Okay.
Don't we do that anyway? Like if a kid destroys a library book or destroys a laptop that we asked for, I mean, that's not necessarily bad behavior. I mean, that might be covered someplace else.
I have no problem just getting rid of that thing.
Okay.
All right. Are we good with that? McKenna, you got all that?
Are we keeping O?
Yes.
Okay. And then also, what language did you want to add in the introduction about equity?
Under the principle, student behavior policies are provided in order to establish expected standards of student behavior, ensure equitable treatment of all students.
Okay.
Before, I'm confused. I thought we were striking L.
Yeah, I think we are striking L.
We are striking L, sir.
But I think when McKenna.
No, she said, are we striking O?
Oh, I thought you said L. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, so you wanted to add ensure equitable, say that again?
Ensure equitable treatment of all students.
Okay, got it.
All right.
Sorry, Nelson, but it's okay. This was a hard one, and it encompasses so many others, so it will be okay.
You're fine. This will also, I don't know how hard this one will be. I will tell you that, are we ready to move on to student dress code?
Yeah.
4316.
Yes.
So I will gladly provide a little background here. In the summer of 2019, we started to discuss changing our dress code policy to allow certain things and to make it gender neutral. A committee was formed to that end, and with that intent, the committee completed its work in January of 2020. I believe a few days before everything happened with Peter Franks, and it all got shuffled around, moved back, and we never really had a chance to pass it. But what you see before you is the work of that committee, and fixed up a little bit and worked with by Ms. Stagner. And it outlines, I mean, it really parallels with the goals that the committee set. Most of the wording is still the same. But I'm sure you guys looked at it. I don't really have anything to add or subtract from it because I was a part of it for so long, but I'll let Ms. Varnum discuss it. And then I'll ask the committee members if they have anything to add. Ms.
So
Barnum?
yep, sorry, I was trying to unmute. In general, on this policy, the only thing that I had highlighted was really for next steps in listing in the Student Code of Conduct the specific range of consequences imposed for violation of dress code. And so, otherwise, my team nor I had anything in here that we felt like we needed to specify.
Okay.
I just had a question. What is a shoe with a solid sole? I assumed that all shoes had a solid sole.
They don't. They do not.
Give me an example, just so I know in my mind.
Slippers.
Oh, slippers. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we went around and around on shoes, and it really was important to have that definition in there. I didn't think shoes, I was with you, I'm like, that's a thing.
Okay. So like the new UGG slippers, Julie, that have the solid bottom with, they're all fuzzy and have the back strap. Are those considered as shoes with a solid? I mean, those are being worn in public all over the place. So is that what we're talking about?
Right. I think that's true. I think one of the issues would be like if you have like satin or like slipper bottoms, like satin or cloth or something that's not. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I understand that. The other thing was just to throw out there this comes up in many schools, children that go, seniors that go to the University of South Carolina, that their mascot is a gamecock. And sometimes the whole school nickname is not put in on T-shirts and such. So it's a school shirt, but with a word that might not be what we want to use. So they shouldn't wear those.
No, they can wear that. They can wear that.
Because it says like "Go Cox." I mean, I'm talking like that.
I mean, I think we talk about vulgar, lewd, or obscene language. I don't know. I don't know if that would qualify or not. Again, that would be an administrative decision.
Well, and I had a principal say, you know what? You can wear that today, only last time. I know you're proud, you just got your letter, but that shirt won't be being worn again. And I can see that, but just.
And I think that goes back to that relationship between administrators and the students, and to say, okay, so this is kind of causing a bit of a disturbance. You get why this is not okay to wear to school. If you're proud, pick a different USC shirt. And we'll help you with that. If this is the only one they gave you and you're really proud and you don't have another one, let me help you with that kind of thing. So I think it's back to kind of working together. But also when it comes to any of these, I think that it's really about, determining if there's some type of disturbance from it when you're trying to interpret one situation from another.
Okay.
Otherwise, school spirit all the way.
School. I know. I'm hearing you. And I love when our kids are all about that. And so that.
Stephanie, I will say there could be an issue for your PTAs, but schools may not use dress down days for economic gain. But
that was my next thing I was coming to is that, I don't see a problem with charging $1 to wear a hat. When, for your PTA, if the principal allows, or if for the United Way campaign, teachers, used to pay, $5 to wear jeans. Now we don't have to because we gave them a waiver, but,
teachers can still do that. This is just student dress code.
Okay. So clubs can't charge, can't get approval from, the principal to like have a hat day or a crazy sock day or something like that and you pay $1.
We didn't think that was fair to disadvantaged students.
Okay.
The committee was unanimous in its
okay. I'm fine with that.
issue.
I'm fine with it. That just is sad, but I'm good. Let's
I understand. And I mean, if you figure $1 per student per day, that's 5 times 700 middle school students. It's $3,500 if you get everybody to participate, but somewhere around $3,000, you'd imagine. For the school, I don't know if that's something we want to revisit.
It's not worth revisiting. I just think people are going to be sad, but or they'll just have to be more creative. Can't sell candy because we're going to get fat. Can't wear hats because it's okay. It's not worth debating over.
I think what we're worried about happening was the
I get that.
school is implementing a stricter dress code for no real reason other than that the PTA wanted to make a couple bucks.
Right. No, I get it. That's fine.
Okay. All right. 4316.
Wait a minute.
Next.
4316.
No, that was 4316. I'm saying we
Next.
are on 4334. Yes. Miss Brinson, unmanned aircraft drones. I think we pulled this last time.
Yes, and I think one of the reasons why we pulled it was to check on the insurance, and I believe that has been completed. And our insurance does cover us.
Okay.
I think the other reason why that might have been tabled, or at least there was not a final decision reached on whether or not commercial use or recreational use would be allowed at all. And so, you know, I think that that's just an important consideration to know when you're going into it, whether or not the superintendent is going to be able to authorize recreational use on school property or commercial use on school property, or whether the use of drones is going to be limited only to educational purposes and school purposes.
So what did we say? Because let me give you an example and see if I broke the rules. You know, we didn't have this policy, but see if I would have broken the rules. When the athletic booster clubs at Laney High School put in their brick walkway, we had a drone, had a student who had a drone, and we took a picture of the walkway above so that we could use it for, you know, just advertising and promotional purposes, and sort of brag rights that we were the first one that had that. Would that not have been allowed under this policy?
I think it's allowed with the approval of the superintendent in writing.
So if we were going to do that, and if any high school or middle school wanted to bring in a drone to do some videoing of student athletes, then we would have to get permission to do that as well.
Yes, according to this policy, you would, and it specifically addresses that you cannot fly a drone over top of students or anybody that's outside.
Okay.
And so that's fine if that's what the committee wants to approve. My question was just, is recreational or commercial use something that is that you want to include, because it's not required? And that was just my point. So that's fine.
Yeah, and I guess where I was coming with that too is that if we have I'm thinking it from a safety point of view. You know, do we really want people capturing, you know, the footprints of our buildings and our recreational facilities for bad purposes, you know, which they could? Who's going to monitor that anyway? You know, that, you know, how am I going to know if somebody was out there on Sundays if nobody saw them?
And, you know, the one thing I would like to add is, you know, I know a lot of the photographers now are taking, like, you know, maybe the seniors are all on the football field and stuff. So this policy, for that to happen, well, it wouldn't happen, because you're saying you can't have the drone above students, correct? So this would be precluding a photographer from getting a picture of all the students in some form or fashion, even in that vein.
This is Mary Hazel.
Yeah, I'm happy with the policy as written. I think it puts in some very good stipulations and requirements.
Yeah, it basically on page 4F specifically says the operator must not fly the unmanned aircraft over people, groups of people, public events, or stadiums full of people, or near emergency response activities.
Okay.
Well, yeah, and that's what I meant. I know that it read that, but I didn't know if we could, if they could get permission from the principal and or superintendent to do specific things. And we're saying we would rather not.
Well, that's
They can
listed-
always ask the superintendent for permission. But they have to ask the superintendent for permission.
So that's listed under FAA safety guidelines. So I don't know if McKenna can shed any light on whether that's an FAA rule or whether that's a.
Yeah, I think I would have to double check, but that section is all comes from the FAA. So that you might not be allowed to do it because of the FAA rules.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
Me too.
Okay.
So this policy does say that you're not going to allow recreational use.
Yes, that's what I'm gathering. That's
Okay,
what
so
I was
so everyone's
trying to
good with
clarify.
that. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Wait a minute.
I'm sorry?
I'm not reading it that way.
I'm not either, because it says that we're allowed it on whatever set,
Page
B2 says we are allowed.
No, so okay, so this is the difference. So no, either you have the person flying the drone is either an FAA certified drone pilot, or the terminology the FAA uses, if they're not a certified drone pilot, then they're a recreational flyer. So that's just talking about the person who's flying the drone. So it could be like a teacher who's using it for an educational purpose who is not a certified drone flyer, but the purpose of the flying of the drone is educational, but the person flying it is not a certified, so therefore they're a recreational flyer.
Okay.
McKenna, if you'll go up under authorized use, the top paragraph on page 2, at the last sentence, it says, however, the superintendent shall not approve the use of unmanned aircraft for recreational purposes on school property during the school day or at any other time, which implies to me that it could be approved outside of school hours for recreational purposes. And if that's not how it, if that's not what it's intended, that was my question.
Gotcha. Yeah, you're right. Never mind. You're right. So it is allowing it when it's not, when students aren't, yeah.
And so we want to say that we don't want them at all. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, I would prefer stronger language. I mean, I don't, like you said, it's a safety issue.
Well,
For me.
does this prevent when we're building schools for the contractor to fly it over to take pictures?
No. I don't read it that way at all. No, I think that would allow, because that's not recreational.
But to that point, Dr. Faust, and the real estate companies and builders that is like the wave of the future on how they're selling properties, and getting good plot plans, so that you can see, will my footprint of my school fit here? Where's the river that goes behind that's going to flood me out? So somewhere I think we do need to kind of address that, where the superintendent can give approval for that.
I think this policy already allows for that.
Yeah.
But what I would say is let's strengthen the language around recreational use. Something that says recreational use will not be permitted at any time during the school day or at any other time, and then end it there.
Okay, but
Do you want to
guess-
just,
Or yeah, it will just not be permitted at any time for any reason.
Except for site
But,
plan.
as a recreational use will not be permitted at any time and for any reason.
Okay.
see, to me, I see that as just your hobbyist, out there on the weekend flying around.
Yes,
What I'm
yes.
thinking of. Yeah.
Are you okay with that language, Ms. Brinson?
Yes.
McKenna, could you add that, please?
I'm just revising that sentence.
Mr. Anderson, you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up, I know we discussed this last time, and I think, first of all, we do use drones, contractors use drones, but we'll also use the drones in evaluation of our buildings. There may be, we may be doing infrared analysis of roofs or, in areas that we cannot easily access. And I think during the discussion at the last policy meeting, everyone was okay with that and considered that a commercial use or our own use, but not recreational use.
That's correct, Eddie.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm totally okay with that. Absolutely. I just want to get rid of the recreation, like Ms. Brinson said, the flyer on the weekend. Does anybody have anything else on 4334? Lovely. All right. Next, 3445, I believe. Is that correct? The student scholarships for future teachers. 43.
So the student scholarship policy, I think that Dr. Faust is still reviewing that with one of my colleagues regarding the structure of that program.
Okay.
Yes.
And we will wait on that. Okay, so next is, let me see. I'm sorry, I lost my place now.
So are we on 3620? Extracurricular activities?
Actually, we are on 4345 student discipline record.
Okay, so you're jumping around, Nelson.
I'm just going off the
The
listing.
Okay.
Yeah, the listing.
3620 next.
What's that?
After student scholarships.
Yeah, no, I was jumping around. I went up to student scholarships when I shouldn't have. But that's good because they're gone. So yeah, 4345 student discipline records, and then we'll talk about short-term suspensions.
4345 is what you're doing?
Yes. Student discipline records, and Dr. Faust or Ms. Varnum, do you want to take us
Julie.
through this?
My team and I did not have any major comments on this. Again, the only thing that I had found on this is next steps for how we will accomplish specifically the database. And we have that already intact through Educator Handbook, just making sure that all of those pieces apply. And then the end of year removal is just going to be a process. But other than that, no concerns with 4345.
Thank you, Ms. Varnum. I also had nothing to add on this policy. Ms. Craybill, Mr. Wildebohr?
I do have a question, but it's like, oh my God, I thought I had these in order, and now we're jumping a little bit, so I can't find it.
Yeah, no, I had nothing. Well,
One of my questions, like if I'm remembering off the top of my head, was are they automatically expunged at the end of when a kid graduates? Or am I confusing that with another policy that?
no, that's it.
So Ms. Craybill, I don't remember what the policy says, but the statute allows a request to expunge records, and and I think that this language follows the statute, that if certain conditions are met, then the superintendent shall expunge the record.
Okay, but they have to, I can't find it, but they have to request it, right?
Yes, it says here that they have to, it says the superintendent or designee shall expunge any record of suspension for a period of more than 10 days or expulsion if the following criteria are met. So it's N, A, B, and C.
But then the next sentence after that, the superintendent may expunge if B and C are met. So after the student graduates and the superintendent determines that they don't need the records.
Right.
All right, I can't find my notes on that one. Would cheating fall in that in a discipline record? I guess one of my questions was, do colleges or the military get to see discipline records so that if a student is applying for something, if they're not specifically asked on an application, have you ever been expelled or suspended? Do they have to answer that? If they haven't been asked, do they have to disclose?
It is my understanding that the application for particular institutions may ask that, and
Right.
may ask that a student provide that kind of information. But if it's not requested, then it's generally not disclosed.
Well, I know we wouldn't offer that, but can another institution ask for that information as part of a student? I mean, do we have to give it if it's asked of us, the school system, and not on an application anywhere?
My thinking is yes, but I want to lean on McKenna or Deborah if they know something different.
Well, certainly, and I just don't know if colleges routinely ask for a student's records. I think if they did, then the student, there's a provision under FERPA to allow those records to be provided. But I don't, if they're not routinely asking for it, I don't think that that's a concern. I don't think that, we would offer it up.
Okay, yeah, cheating is what comes to mind, that, obviously we don't want our kids cheating and violating our honor code, but so they can, if it's in their file, like I guess what I'm trying to figure out is when I was reading, I don't know if it was in that policy or another one about the principal gets to keep a special file on certain discipline things. And, I'm just trying to figure out, does that file go away also when a student graduates? Like it's destroyed, it's, but it's not included into the student file somewhere that somebody has access to.
So in our student record process, we do have what's considered to be a module 3, and that's more specific. So this policy says, these are like kind of, this is the backyard, but then we're working on the flower bed over here kind of thing. Okay. So inside the big fence, our student records process has a mod 3 that can have additional information that the principal may hold that doesn't pass from school to school, that may just maintain because it's not required to pass on. And it also may give an inaccurate picture of a student's performance or, projected performance. And so a principal can make those determinations if it's not something that's required to be maintained. So certain discipline records are required to be maintained. And then we do follow the general statute on records disposition or expungement. And so if we can't get rid of those, then we don't. But if they're not required to be maintained, we may not keep them.
Okay.
I know that's a very general answer.
Yeah, I just didn't want a student to be punished, or forever because they made one bad mistake, cheating on a test, for example.
What about short-term suspensions that might be recorded? And I don't know if it's Power School or some other program that the discipline records. So after a student graduates, if there was a request for their discipline records and it was on the computer, those would still contain all of the short-term suspensions, wouldn't they?
They would, but we might not necessarily have all of the referral sheets or things like that. And so we use a third party application educator handbook that has our interventions and our referrals and all that information in it that feeds into Power School as the authoritative source for discipline. And then Power School is downloaded on an annual basis. And so we have those records. They're not generally records that are utilized, but we can have them to go back and reference and pull records if requested. But in general, there may be times when this doesn't apply, but in general, when a principal or other administrator investigates an incident of cheating, based on the details, they may determine that that goes into the student discipline record, or it, based on the details, might be something that they establish a warning system for and develop a behavior contract, and they have those records in a mod 3 that don't go anywhere after. So it depends on the level of consequence they decide to apply to it based on the details of the incident.
Yeah, and I get that too, but that again, you want to establish trends. That if we get a new principal and now Stephanie's cheated again, it's a different cheat. Like, and I keep using cheating because that's the easiest one I can think of where we may not have to keep records. But you wouldn't want to disadvantage a kid going to another school. Hey, he cheated once, but so that school is going to have to figure out. The new school would have to figure out. Okay, I'm a cheater, and so I get my pass at that school too.
But I don't necessarily know if that file, does that file follow the kid? I don't remember getting that as a principal. I don't think it follows. I know it was, when I was a principal, I never got, unless they were expelled and they were, or not expelled, but doing a 10-day.
Yeah.
And then they were now entering, I'd have that file, but not
Okay.
to.
Well, I think in Power School, if it's inside of the county, I'm pretty sure, because I remember at North, I would get, if a child came over from South, I would be able to see their discipline record from South. So I think it does, at least for during the school year, it does stay with the child if it is in county, I believe.
Are we
And if
able
it's,
to, are we
yeah, I'm
able
sorry.
to delete them at the end of the year?
It depends on, so we're talking about whether things are entered into Power School and stay in our system. We can amend those, but generally what gets tracked in Power School stays in Power School. Now, and so Pete's right. Like we transfer one kid over, we can have that historical detail in the discipline record. Where we have amended that, and this is a conversation Dr. Faust and I've had, is when we're looking at like a long-term suspension request and the packet of information that needs to be reviewed really doesn't need to have an entire historical discipline record, but record over the past 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so if an incident such as what Ms. Crable's mentioning and for cheating, if it's not entered into Power School, that's one of those things that's maintained in that principal's separate file, and they may decide not to enter it because of the nature of the incident and not wanting it to be on a permanent record for a kid, thus maybe a warning or something.
Okay. That was probably more explanation than the question merited, but thank you.
Okay, next policy is 4351. I've had a lot of issues with our short-term suspension numbers over the years. The incredible inequity in those numbers. I was hoping that and I don't know if it's best to address this through policy or through practice or both, but I was hopeful that the policy could be discussed with the equity committee, Ms. Farnham, Dr. Faust. I don't know if you'd be interested in looking at this policy a little bit more in depth, but I have a problem with short-term suspensions in general. And I don't know what our exact numbers are, but I would like a broader discussion on that.
So this is actually something that our equity work group is dealing with. So the work group that is kind of an underlying group of the equity committee. And so our district behavior specialist sits on the equity work group, and she and I and the special ed director and our new MTSS coordinator are actually working through solving disproportionality and achieving equity. And part of that's, I just happen to have it because I've been studying it, using data to change hearts and minds, and also looking at unconscious bias in schools with regard to disciplinary practices. And so we have monthly monthly principal meetings and monthly PD that's really addressing, and that's actually been on the agenda last month. It's on the agenda for this month, really helping principals understand digging through the different data sources that we have, whether it's educator handbook or whether it's NTSS data, which is the multi-tiered systems of support. And so that, I think that work really lies in the practice and the understanding of operating through your data and making decisions, as opposed to policy. But that's just my response to that. But I really appreciate that's the focus too.
Can I add something in here? And just again, not that what I did was perfect by any stretch, but I think it was a sound educational philosophy that this policy is lacking. And I'm not a big proponent of short-term suspensions in any form or fashion either, but I do think that we do need to have some kind of a reentry, not plan, but I think there does need to be a meeting. So if I suspend a child for 5 days, they come back and they just go back to class. Oh, carry on, we're back to it. I mean, I think there really does need to be an administrator. If a child is suspended, I think that the child should meet with that administrator before just being sent on back to class. And it doesn't have to be before the child gets back, but I mean, during that first day, I think that there should be some kind of a structure where a counselor or the administrator meets with that child, so we don't get a situation where the child went home for 5 days, did nothing, and they're getting even further behind, so that that cycle is getting worse and worse. So I'd like to see if we couldn't, under the page 2 of 3, add a number 4 under number 3, something along the lines, and again, I'm sure it'll be worded better than what I'm going to say, but a post-suspension meeting with the administrator during the first day that they return to school. I mean, just a short, it doesn't even have to, no big meeting, but just something where that administrator does touch base with that child to make sure that, that number one, that they understand why they were sent home, if they were sent home. And also, to hopefully be a support for that child, to say, hey, let's carry on. Let's put that behind us. Let's go forward. Instead of just saying, okay, well, you've been suspended for 5 days, come back to school and start over again,
So Pete, would you put that a student under a short-term suspension must be provided with the following? And if you wanted to add,
yes, sir.
If you wanted to add 4, an opportunity to meet with the administrator upon the child's first day of reentry to school, or something to that effect.
Perfect. I mean, I really do think
no problem. I have no problem with that. I think that's fair. No problem with that.
Sound thing, and that way the child, some children probably come back with the idea that the administrator hates me, and hopefully we can reestablish some of those bonds between the administrator and the child.
Yeah, I have no real problem putting that into policy.
Thank you.
So I just had a couple comments. I don't know if they need to be changed at all, but in section A, pre-suspension rights of the student, where it says at the in kind of in the middle of the paragraph, the student has the right to be present at the informal hearing, but does not have the right to have a parent or representative present. So how come a student can't call their parent and say, "Mom, I'm in serious trouble. Can you come?"
Well, we've actually talked about that before. You'll see at the suspension or expulsion, the short-term suspension hearing is a hearing in the loosest possible definition. It is this has happened, explain what your side of the story is, and then the administrator simply makes a determination. I wouldn't say that any situation where a short-term suspension is given would be serious trouble. It would just be your typical, there's a fight in school. I'm guessing, Ms. Varnum, I don't know if you can speak more to that.
Yeah, it's really that moment that some type of incident comes to again, probably if it's a short-term suspension, not a serious incident, but some type of incident serious enough has come to the administrator's attention, and they're like, oh, wait, I see that, so-and-so has stolen, someone else's, notebook, whatever, I don't know. And you go and get the student and say, hey, come talk to me a minute. All right, so I see that this is what somebody is claiming. Can you tell me what this is about? What do you know about this? did you do anything about this? But if a kid says, look, I can't talk to you without my parent, I really can't, then you, as an administrator, you negotiate through that and say, okay, well, I really need to know what happened. If you want to get your parent on the phone, that's fine. This is just saying they don't have the right to have their parent present at that conversation. It's titled as a hearing because it's a due process right, but it's really that conversation with the school administrator and the student to say, hey, this is what has been, I've been informed that this is what you are being accused of. What do you have to say for yourself? Is this something that you believe you've done or not? So it's about whether they have the right, not about whether it's best practice or not.
And I would just add that this is that initial meeting with.
Uh-oh, you're frozen, Deborah.
I hate Zoom. I hate the
So
platform.
I think what she was going to clarify, I think what she was going to clarify is this is that initial meeting, that initial conversation with a kid of, hey, this is what's happened. Okay, there she is. Sorry.
I'm sorry, can you hear me? So this is just that, what is known as just that initial due process, as Julie said, and this is required before a student can be suspended for up to 10 days. Under the case laws that's developed, you have to have that informal notice to the student. This is what you are accused of. What do you have to say for yourself? What is your response to that? And as Julie said, they can call for their parent. I will just, I think it's a nuanced distinction, but the principal authority to suspend for up to 10 days. So the principal has to do this. If it is a more serious, say there was a serious fight and the student had to be suspended for 10 days before a long-term suspension is recommended and acted upon by the superintendent. So this will occur, this informal due process will occur even if it's a serious offense, but the principal only has authority to suspend for 10 days and then has to recommend a long-term.
Okay, so this is going back kind of to that list of things we were talking about, including minor violations. Is this what we're talking about?
It includes that, but it also any suspension for 10 days if there's also a pending long-term suspension as well. So the student is entitled to that first due process with the principal for any suspension, whether it's short or ended for long-term.
Okay, at the bottom of the paragraph that says emergency suspension, where it says you'll have an informal hearing as soon as practical. I know why we have to put those words in, but it just for my knowing, what does that mean? What does that timeline really look like as soon as is practical?
So again, this is when the student has to be removed from campus immediately and you don't even have time to do that initial informal due process conversation. And as soon as practical, I mean, that's going to depend on the circumstances. If it means the next day when the student and parent can come in where maybe the student's been arrested and it's a very unsafe situation, law enforcement takes them away. It may be a few days before.
Okay. So
get a hold of that student. You may have to do it by.
Okay. Is a student or a parent allowed to request in-school suspension instead of out-of-school suspension, for things that are minor? And I'm asking that just because I think some students would be better off sitting in a room with an adult that can help them get their work and help them do their work. I mean, is that an option?
I'm sure it is, but I don't know. I'm sure they're already doing that. I don't know that we
Yes,
put it.
I think that may be
Yeah.
I think that may be a conversation that's already happening.
Yes, that's very, very standard. And of course, the parent can definitely ask for that. Also, in that school behavior management plan, it's going to have those tiered responses. And the best practice is that you move through those least restrictive responses before you move to the more restrictive.
Okay. And then just one last comment on that. This is one of the things that has bothered me for a while, and I think our school system is getting a little bit better at it. It's in section D, notice to parent or guardian, in paragraph number 2, the second to the last sentence, when it says, if English is the second language of the parent, the notice must be provided in English and the parent's primary language when the appropriate foreign language resources are readily available. And I'm just thinking that we need to make that readily available at the time, because there's nothing worse than a parent not being able to even understand what's happening.
I'll
Yeah.
just insert that's a legal requirement when it's readily available. The board can go above and beyond that, but that's the legal requirement.
Okay.
And
I just don't want
in-
us ever to fall back on that, well, we didn't have to, because that's just the wrong approach.
So just to give an example, so our educator handbook system does give us options for multiple languages, like many of our systems do. The only concern, and the reason it's helpful to say when the resources are readily available, there could be a language that we are reaching out to university systems to find a translator or interpreter, and there are also some languages that don't have a written form, and we've experienced that where we did have some refugees in the community. And for example, from a particular dialect in the Congo, and there was really no way to put that in a written form in their own language, but working through those.
Okay. Just wanted to keep it in the forefront. Okay.
That deals with short-term suspension.
Nelson,
Thank
just
you,
want to
Mr.
make sure, so we are adding something on there
Yes,
before we are?
Yes.
Good, all right, thank you.
yes. Ms. Varnum, Dr. Faust, at some point maybe in the spring, once we start reopening, I would like to have some sort of presentation at a board meeting on this, on the suspension and what the work group is doing. I think that'd be great information. So thank you very much.
Mr. Beaulieu, if I might, I just had one question about under paragraph D. It looks like this was added from your current policy. School officials shall forward a copy of the written notice to the superintendent. And I wonder if that's something that you're doing and if that's something that is necessary to continue doing. Because again, this is a opportunity to review your existing practices and see if they still make sense. And I'm just throwing that out there.
Sure.
Yeah, I can answer that. That falls into our educator handbook system and our ability to pull any of those reports through educator handbook or PowerSchool. So we automatically can view those from the superintendent's office.
It just reads as though a principal has to send a separate copy. And if that's not how it's understood, that's fine. It sounded to me like there was an extra step in there of sending it to the superintendent.
Yeah, I marked that as well and then wrote that educator handbook and PowerSchool reports accomplish that for us. So if the language needs to be different, I'm fine with that.
Okay. All right. So the next item on the agenda is removal of students during the day. Ms. Varnum.
I don't have anything noted on this one from me or the team.
Nor did I. Ms. Craybill and Mr. Wildebohr.
No, it looks good to me.
Okay. That is
Check.
okay. 4352 will be moved forward for first reading. 4353 long-term suspension, 365 day.
So I've highlighted a lot of things on here just for
Now I gotta find them.
just for carrying out. I did have a question on page 4 of 9, which is section B2.
Okay.
Notice to the student's parent. And again, I think this might be a question I asked in December, and I'm not sure where we landed on that, where it says the superintendent shall review the principal's recommendation. Do we need to put or designee throughout that paragraph?
I guess that would be a question for Dr. Faust. Would this be something that the superintendent handles directly, Dr. Faust? Your would this be something you could delegate?
I currently handle it.
Oh, okay. Well, let's put designate.
So that's why I'm asking, because I do that for him. And just want to make sure that the language in that is correct.
Can you make that change, McKenna?
Yep, that sounds good.
And I will say you handle it very well.
Thank you. The only other thing in that same section, written notice of the recommendation of long-term suspension, 365, or expulsion. As the district administrator in charge of this, I would request that we have new due process letters written, if that's something, Deborah, that we can talk about. I know we talked about that a few months back, but I do think that that will be helpful.
Of course.
And that is all that I noted through this one. Lengthy policy, but has a really, I think, does a good job in the sections for determination of appropriate consequence and really going into the culpability and intent and dangerousness.
So in that policy, on page 1, the kind of in the number 3 in the second paragraph, down to the bottom where it says principal may recommend long-term suspensions for a minor violation if aggravating circumstances justify treating the student's behavior as serious. And again, I'm going back to, maybe this is the egg example again, you know, is this like, do we need to list, or do we need to talk about what aggravating circumstances might be to elevate somebody from a minor, for one of the minor violations, since we haven't ever listed what a serious violation is? And that's where I was trying to come from when I was reading these things backwards, is that we don't list the serious, but we list all the minors, and then we have the minor with the caveat if it's an aggravated one. So I just feel like that could leave some confusion.
I would say that those issues don't need to be listed because they would be settled at a hearing, almost assuredly. And if they're not, it would be because the suspended student and the family would recognize that the behavior justifies the sentence. That would be how I read it. I don't know that you have to get into the specifics of what would justify what, because we almost always hear these.
Okay, and maybe I haven't. I'm just thinking about the parents who are gonna cry party foul, where why is my incident, you know, different than another incident that I heard about, or I don't understand what aggravating is, and I think you're aggravated. You've elevated mine to aggravating because of some, you know, I'm black, I'm a girl, you know, I'm a boy.
The board will hear. So the board will hear almost all of these. The board will have a hearing as well.
To clarify, for long-term suspension, those don't come to the board, though. Those are the ones that go to the hearing panel. The expulsion ones, though, Mr. Bowyer. Yep, you are right about the expulsion ones. In this, that would be a part of the conversation between the principal and the parent, and then would go to the hearing panel. And the hearing panel we have Dave Spencer as our hearing officer, and then another administrator, and then a community member, and then the parents can also bring someone else with them. And so that's one of the things that covers that. But I do want to I want to ask for clarification on the list of minor infractions. I don't recall where we have a list of minor infractions versus major.
In policy 4300 on student behavior policies, where I just asked you were probably ready to throw eggs back at me on trying to list all the, I'm going to remember that example forever, Dr. Faust, because sorry, but that's where I was getting at, because when you were telling me there that don't worry about all these lists because they're going to show up in other policies, and now we're in another policy and they haven't shown up. They're showing up as minors with some sort of aggravated part.
To clarify, that list is not a list of the minor violations. That's a list of responses.
No, there is a list of minor violations in there too. It's not a list. It's written in the first paragraph, kind of with comma, where
Those
it
are
says
just a couple
5.
examples. Those are
Julie,
a few examples. It wasn't an exhaustive list.
Right,
And-
it was just examples.
Right. Are they included in the student code of conduct? Is that where you would find all of the different violations?
Yes.
Yes,
That's what it would be.
so each of the policies, and I wrote this out on each of the policies mentions including a range of consequences for violations for each of these. And so I don't have it to show on the screen, but I can show right here my little notes for each of the policies that are asking for a range of consequences for the violations where they would be listed out. And again, that would be in procedure or in administrative procedure behind the policy, so
Okay.
that the policy doesn't list them individually, but each policy requires including that range of consequences for specific violations.
Okay, so.
I'm sorry, I was unclear on what you were talking about in that list.
Okay, sorry. All right, so if a parent was, sitting there in the principal's office trying to figure out what my kid specifically has done and why is it not so bad, because I've only read this in the policy, then that's when the principal would show them, here's our protocol, that here's our procedure. I mean, are principals allowed to share that with a parent, that I'm not just pulling this out of the air, that this is what I'm going by?
Absolutely. It should be transparent. And I'm looking for where that's added in the policy. Under the specific policies of the infractions, it's listed in those, and many of those we may have covered already. But for example, in disruptive behavior, which is 4315, the policy requires a range of consequences for the listed violations, or for violations which would have to be listed out as disruptive behavior. The same thing with gang-related activity, drugs and alcohol, tobacco products, theft, assault, threat. All those are separate policies. So there's not a particular one list. It's that lump of policies that cover all of the different kinds of infractions.
Okay,
And
so
then
I
the
just
range of
probably-
consequences.
I need to go back and look at those because those were approved prior to me. So I think that's where probably some of my questions are coming from. So I can do that homework.
Okay,
I got
yeah,
two.
it was. Yeah, and for example, 4315, which was already approved, it's the prohibited behavior, for example. It covers gambling, verbal, it's appearance of clothing, literature that's inappropriate. And the language in each of these policies says the superintendent designee shall list in the code of conduct the specific range of consequences that may be imposed on a student for violations of this policy. And that's a consistent message in each of these that I have listed here in my to-do homework. Work with principals to create it.
That is good.
If I could throw two questions out real quick. One is, I think I heard this a second ago, but I want to clarify. 5 of 9, section 3, the hearing panel. You said that has a community member on it. Is that correct?
Oh, sorry. Yes, it may. So the creation of the hearing panel involves an administrator that's not from the particular school of the incident, but of the same age span. Might be a community agency representative, and then and it's a panel of 3, and then also our hearing officer.
Okay. And my other question is on 7 of 9, section 5, and this is something I've heard before that and I just want to make sure that we're in a good place legally. The school system, due to limited resources. Is that a valid, I've always heard, like, especially in the EC world, if the child needs it, we have to get it for him one way or the other. This is not necessarily specifically for an EC child, but it could be. And, is that something we want to put in writing, that we may not be able to help that child because of limited resources?
Well, honestly, I don't find that we're in that situation, but it's always helpful to have an out in a policy if there's just no way to comply with it. But educationally appropriate, and I love that you mentioned the whole IDEA piece and EC piece. Thank you.
I got it from a great person that I used to work with, and do again.
Thank you. Thank you. So educationally appropriate alternative services. So we're not required to have the full range of possible alternative services. We do have a really good range in this school system where, for example, we have a day treatment entity that can cover K-8. That's not a requirement in school systems. And so I think that I would use that as an example. While we might refer to our K-8 day treatment school, Lake Forest Academy, some districts might not be able to do that. And if there was some major problem where we couldn't maintain having that type of facility, that we could still be compliant with our policy.
Awesome. Thank you.
So in section A, the number 5, all the way down, when we're talking about students who have been, expelled from a private school, or again, this goes back to my question on, does the discipline file or the expulsion file follow the student? So if we expel one of our kids, do we have to send our file to a private school that they might apply to, and vice versa, that if a kid is expelled from another school and wants to, like a private school, and wants to come into our school?
So it's a requirement of our enrollment, and that's consistent in our safe school policy, which is one of these. I'll find it in a minute. It's in this, I think it's 43.
Yeah, and I'll just add, when a student is presented for enrollment, the parent under state law has to certify that they are not under a term of long-term suspension or expulsion from another district.
Okay.
And that's in policy 4115 that's still on the list to get to. And it's students under suspension or expulsion or convicted of a felony, and how they have to disclose that. That's for public schools. So I wouldn't want to speak for private school entities.
Okay. So, and at the bottom of that paragraph, it says, that the student is not entitled to be present on educational property and is not considered a student of the school system. And again, this is probably not our problem, but so we don't have, there is no law that says that somebody has to educate children, even if they're bad.
So I think that these are going to be very few and far between, for one. And these would be only expulsions that are determined by the board. So just like Mr. Bollier was mentioned earlier, that would be a determination of the board, or a quorum of the board. And also, this is only if there is not some type of disabling condition. If the student falls under the due process and rights under IDEA, so a student with an IEP, then that actually doesn't technically apply, because we are still responsible for their educational services. It just has to be determined the appropriate placement. But an expulsion is going to be absolutely few and far between.
Okay, because I guess I was thinking back to when I was on the committee for the Blue Ribbon Commission, when we were trying to deal with students who were incarcerated, that the warden wasn't feeling compelled to educate them, and that was kind of like a privilege that you get to go to school. I guess my brain was kind of just going back there. It's like, how do we throw a kid out into the world and just say, all right, that's what they wanted. I don't want to go to school. This is great. I don't have to be in school, because now I'm just bad enough that I don't have to be there.
And Ms. Craybill, the board, before it reaches the determination of needing to expel a student, has to consider whether there's some alternative educational program available that it could refer the student to instead. And so the board that hears the expulsion will determine that the school system just is not able to educate that student, whether it's virtually, remotely, or through some alternative program. So you have to go through that analysis before you even get to the decision to expel. Okay. And then the student can come back after 180 days and request readmission. So if they can make a case that they are no longer a threat, and be readmitted.
Okay.
And speaking generally, Ms. Craybill, I'm a marshmallow. I'm always looking to avoid that that act of expulsion always. And we have a lot of alternatives that we can employ.
Okay. And so I guess, to that point, back on page 8 it's in section B, but all the way down at the bottom, not the last paragraph, but it says, regardless of whether the school system provides alternative education, the board expects school system administrators to work with agencies to help the student and parent identify. So I guess that's what we've been talking about, is like so I'm the board and I expect, you, Julie, principal, to work with the student. We don't have to put it in policy, but just give me just 1 minute, if you could, on what does that expectation really look like?
So, for example, if we have a student that really cannot be determined to be safely maintained in the school system, let me go back to the language that we were just looking at. Continued presence in school constitutes a clear threat to the safety of other students or employees. And I hate to give a harsh example, but this is an example. Charged and then convicted of first-degree murder or homicide. Yeah. And so in that, there would be some, especially if it's school age. And so if there were not prior charges as of 2019, any student under 18 is still considered a juvenile now, because that the adult criminal age raised until 18. And so, for example, we would be coordinating with juvenile court or a juvenile court counselor, because they're not called probation officers, or court counselors, on access to educational records. And so we may recommend some types of records, or some types of access to particular programs or online options or something like that, that would be accessible to that student or that juvenile while in a juvenile facility.
Okay. And so the last thing I wanted to just ask about, in section D, where it says reducing suspension and expulsion rates, we're talking about all that. Is this where we might want to also reference our, the school to prison pipeline, that the partnership, the justice partnership? I mean, would it be worth saying that just to keep that on our radar, that we are using those resources to try and not do this, if at all possible?
I think that's up to the determination of the board. I would say that that was captured in that overall 4300 policy as that's kind of the table of contents or the preface to all of these 4300 policies. But of course, I would defer to Deborah or the will of the board.
And at this time, unfortunately, I'm gonna have to step out, but I will be back as soon as I can.
Okay, so
Thank you, Mr. Wildebohr.
So Nelson, what do you think? I'm kind of like a redundant person, that you can, look at it, and especially with issues that we want to keep in the forefront of our thought process, that just to make a mention of it, and again, and it's not like we haven't mentioned the other policies multiple times, in that 4300 as our overriding, mentioned it there. But I'm just thinking that we might want to just put some language in there where it says the board encourages school administrators to find ways to reduce the suspension and expulsion rates using practices, in our justice partnership, or kind of using the same words that we used back in 4300.
That's fine. Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
So McKenna, can you just wordsmith that up for us? And I forget was it in 4300 where you actually just added that? Let me look. It
Yes.
is. And it says consistent with the school justice partnership. If we can just add some words like that, just again, to call the attention, to the work that we're doing, on the equity group and everywhere else in our world, that we're really taking a look at it. And so there's nothing wrong with referencing it again.
All right. Anything else from anybody on 4353? Okay. 4353 first reading. Our next policy for discussion will be 4362, early readmission of students suspended for 365 days or expelled. I know, I think we have the same issue if a student is suspended from school, yada, yada, the superintendent or designee. I think we need to put that in there again, don't we, Ms. Martin? So please, let's just make sure that that's there, McKenna. And I guess the only question I did have on this policy was whether or not we are we notifying expelled students or 365-day suspended students of the opportunity to apply for early reinstatement? We are doing that?
It has been included in the expulsion letters, and I haven't seen a long-term suspension letter, but it should be in there as well.
Okay.
Yes,
I mean, I've
correct.
actually served for 2 years. I've never seen a readmittance case. I'd love to see one. I love a turnaround story. But other than that, I have no questions about this policy. Ms. Craybill?
Yeah, I
Ms.
had
Barnum?
two. One was in section B, it's the second sentence where it says the board will consider and decide on petitions for readmission. So do those take place in a closed session so that we're not talking about, okay.
Yes.
And then the other one in section, it's kind of like the end of section B and in section C where it's talking about your appeal, to come back to school. And I was just wondering why short-term suspension say that if your readmission request is denied, then no subsequent request from that student will be considered for the rest of the 365 days. But then if a student is expelled, the board will not reconsider the request until 6 months after the submission. So why do expelled kids get to petition more or more frequently than just a long-term suspension?
So
seems it would be opposite.
I'm not sure I understand your question exactly, but the expulsion is permanent unless the board makes a decision to readmit. So and there's a right after 180 days to request readmission under law. For a long-term suspension, that has a set term, and so it will automatically end, and the student will be legally entitled to come back to school at the end of that long-term suspension. So unlike an expulsion that's permanent and the student can reapply and show that they are no longer a clear and present danger, the long-term suspension automatically ends. And that may be I think that may answer your question. If not, I'll try again.
Okay. All right. So does a student at the end of long-term suspension, whatever number that we give that person, for how many days they have to be out, maybe I missed it in here. So when can they first apply to come back?
There's no application for return. The end of long-term suspension means
appeal.
they at the end of the long-term suspension, they automatically are offered the opportunity for return.
Okay, so it says if the request for readmission is denied. So what does that mean? Like if we're automatically letting them back in, then why would there be a readmission request?
For early readmission, for admission after 180 days rather than the 365.
That's what I was asking. You said that there is no, oh, I see what it says. It's up in the top line, 100. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
If they fulfill the full length of the long-term suspension, there's no need to apply. They just return. They are off. That is an obligated opportunity for them. We are obligated to make sure that's offered. It's if they want to reapply for early return.
Okay, and they can do that halfway through at 180 days.
For long-term suspension, they can apply to come back the second semester. So if there's a long-term is to the end of the school year, and, or anything over 10 days, but I think typically it's till the end of the school year. So they can reapply to come back early from that long-term suspension at the beginning of the second semester under those circumstances. For a 365, halfway through, they can reapply to come back. And then for an expulsion, it is after 80 days. And because they're permanent, never going to come back unless the board affirmatively readmits them.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay.
And to clarify, Ms. Craybill, this might help. The 365s we refer to as 365s. Long-term suspensions are shorter than that, and so those are two different things.
Right, and yeah, so I guess what I was reading 365 and not long-term, and just was lumping them in together. Okay, that's what I think I was confusing myself. Okay, thank you.
Okay, 4370 are student discipline hearing procedures. Ms. Barnum?
Yes. Let's see. The only thing on this one would still be listing designee. And so on section A, 10 and 11, we need to mention designee, but 12 has it in there.
Okay, and I didn't have anything for board hearings. I thought that was well put together and still reflective of what we're doing. Ms. Stagner, did you have anything?
No, I didn't have any notes on this one.
All right, Ms. Craybill?
Yeah, I did. And some of this stuff, guys, it's just because I don't know what we're doing. So that's why I'm asking. So I won't have to ever do this again. The in section A, number 1, where it says, the hearings will be conducted by a hearing panel consisting of the hearing officer and 2 other appropriately trained people. And then further down, it says that the hearing officer appoints those 2 people, and the panel can't be an employee. So my question is, how do we appoint those 2 people? And, and how do we know they're appropriately trained? I mean, do we have a pool of people all ready to go, with that? And one of my other concerns is our appropriately trained person pool a diverse pool, so that we make sure that, if just so the racial card isn't called, or the EC card isn't called, or whatever card might be called, that parents feel like they're getting a fair hearing with like a panel of their peers, like in a jury kind of thing?
Yes, so anyone that serves on the hearing panel has been trained by the hearing officer, and it is a pretty diverse pool, and it's a pretty deep pool, because it might be that a hearing needs to happen in 48 hours,
right,
and at a particular time. And regarding, so our practice generally is to have that as another school administrator, again, not involved in the particular school. So where it says it cannot include an employee, under the supervision of the principal who made that particular disciplinary recommendation. So it's of a different school, but we really focus on the same grade span. So if it's a high school case, we look for a high school administrator. And generally we, and the hearing officer looks to include diverse panels with gender, with ethnicity, and also with background understanding. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So in section A6, it talks about that the student has the right to call witnesses, or not call, but we may withhold witness names, and yet in number 8, it says that the parent can call these witnesses, so isn't that contradictory? Like that says that they're allowed to have them, but we don't, if we want to protect the witness, they're not allowed to have them. I mean, is that contradictory in some sort?
So I'll let McKenna or Deborah speak into that, but this is, well, present witnesses or documentary evidence. And some of the documentary evidence, it may be determined that a witness doesn't need to be present because the documentary evidence is provided. And that could be where a witness name may be withheld, whether if it's a regard for a safety concern.
Right.
But I think that when looking at number 8, it's examining the witnesses that have been presented. And so I think that's different from any kind of documentary evidence. But I would rather Deborah or McKenna speak to that.
I'm going to let McKenna address the way the policy is drafted, since this is the School Board Association policy, and then I can weigh in about the statute.
Hold
Is
on.
my question clear, or have to understand what I'm asking? Okay.
Well, about the statute then while McKenna's looking for that. I'm going to turn off my video because I was told that might help it not freeze up as much. So the student under state law has the right to question the witnesses who appear at the hearing, but it is not required for the district to necessarily bring students as witnesses if there are student statements, for example, and the identity of those students could be withheld if there is a risk or harm or threat to those other students. And the the principal can testify about why he or she thinks that these students were credible and why the evidence and the statements are to be believed, even if the witness isn't there to be cross-examined.
Okay.
Yeah, this is just written so that because the student does have a right to question witnesses who are at the hearing, we have to say that, but if the witnesses aren't there, then.
Okay. Okay, that's good. I just point of order. Thank you.
All right, so 4370, we are good with that one. Let's move that forward for first reading. 4000, focus on families. Ms. Varnum. I have focus on families, but I have focus on students on the policy.
Right.
Focus on families is on the list, but focus on students would be correct. So, Ms. Varnum.
Right. I don't have any. Yep, it's focus on students. I don't have anything for policy 4000.
I don't either.
Okay. 4000. Policy 4001, equal educational opportunities. Ms. Varnum.
I don't have any comments on this one.
Me either.
I do not either. 4003, translating policies for students and parents.
I don't have any policy comments on this one, only application. So we'll handle that administratively.
And I have no policy comments either.
The only thing I have, and I know what my answer is going to be, but I hate this even being written in our policy about the translation when it says, as funds permit to the extent practical and otherwise required by law. I mean, I'm looking at the otherwise required by law that, I just think it's incumbent upon us to be ready to translate, because that is where a lot of our problems come from, with parents that don't understand, what's going on with their school, and they're leaving it up to their kids to tell them. And so, number one, most kids are honest and aren't going to lie. Some kids are going to lie. And some kids may not even understand what when they're translating. So they might not be translating, they're translating to the best of their ability, but maybe not in the extent that we need them to understand. So it's probably there because that's the law and we have to say it, but I'm just hoping that we do better than that. So-
And I would say in all practicality, this doesn't refer to Spanish translation. This would be the very rare languages where a translator is not available for a very precise type of document.
Okay, and the only, and I come back to that because one of the things that I heard in a recent equity meeting that the county put on, when we were talking about the basically the COVID vaccine, and the lady that I didn't jot her name down, but who was representing the Latinx community, that just said that we are so far behind in what we do, even in Spanish, and that's the primary one that that we deal with, and everybody always says Spanish when we have 43 other languages in our school, and I just somehow think that we have to do a better job at that. And again, it's probably not in this policy, but somewhere we have to make it more of a priority that we got some language people.
Well, we are. Well, this doesn't apply to anything about policy other than
I know
I have. We're putting together job descriptions for. To work with our communications department, Spanish speakers, and it's going to be that. And so translators, all of that good stuff, but someone actually in the social media world, someone who can do like the outreach, and it's going to reside in the communications department.
Perfect, thank you, because Maria Black does a great job and her whole team does, but she can't do everything, even though we gave her the cape and she's going to try, but thank you. I appreciate that comment.
We also have access to a language line for languages other than Spanish. So that is available that we can use, and our interpreters are familiar with how to use that. So I just want to put that out there too.
Thank you. My daughter, she's a nurse and at Mayo Clinic, and she oftentimes has to get out her iPad translator device that they've had training on and give discharge information to sick people in a language that she doesn't know if it's a nighttime and they don't have anybody. And so she said that's the most uncomfortable part about my job, is trying to give really important information in a language that I don't know. And so I consider school system stuff really important information, so maybe that's the secondary reason that it's on my mind. But thank you for those explanations.
Okay, policy 4005, rights of separated or divorced parents and others regarding minor children. I expected to have something here. It was actually really, really well put together. So I have no comment, Ms. Barnum.
My only one is the in definition of a parent, and that second sentence, grandparents, step-parents, and others who are awarded visitation rights by a court order will be treated the same as parents or guardians who have visitation rights with respect to physical custody. My only question is, what if there are limited visitation? So they might have been awarded visitation rights, but for example, it might have to be supervised. I would think that wouldn't necessarily fall into treating them the same as the parent or guardian who has visitation with respect to physical custody.
Ms. Stagner?
I think that's right. I didn't have a specific suggestion on language, but I was a little thrown by the reference to grandparents and step-parents and other people who might not be parents. And so I would certainly welcome some clarity in that provision by the folks that implement this policy.
McKenna, can we come up with some different language and revisit this policy at next month's meeting?
Sure. Yeah, that language came from your old policy, so.
Okay.
I don't like it.
I don't like it either.
Well, can we not just change the language right now and move it on? Because that seems like a simple one.
Yeah, I think we could. I'm always a little bit more hesitant with these, just given what the sensitivity of the issue we're dealing with. But if McKenna, if you have a suggestion, or if somebody can have a suggestion about how we can.
Yeah, I think my suggestion would be to delete that second sentence under definition of a parent, because it really isn't a definition of a parent. And if a grandparent has some other right that could be dealt with on a case-by-case basis, if they want to, for example, come to the school to
That's fine.
to have lunch with their child, or their grandchild, I don't think it fits under definition of a parent, and I would probably just delete that
Strike it.
sentence.
That's fine.
Thank you.
With that, does anybody have anything else? So McKenna, are you clear on that? We're gonna strike that sentence.
Got it.
Thanks. Or anybody else have anything on this policy? Lovely. Moving on, moving up. Policy 4023, education for pregnant and parenting students. Ms. Barnum, I swear we're gonna be done with these eventually, and I won't call you every time.
This one looks good to me.
Me as well.
I had a question about the special scheduling, and let me pull up because you are moving fast and I'm trying to take notes here. There was a reference to special scheduling, or maybe there wasn't a reference to special scheduling. I think the statute has a reference to special scheduling for students who may be pregnant or parenting. It's in the first paragraph of 115C 375.5. A local school administrative unit may provide programs to meet the special scheduling and curriculum needs of pregnant and parenting students. And I don't know if that's something that is, it's not referenced in the policy. And
Ms. Farnham, are we doing that? And if not, should we be?
We are, and I'm looking at 375.5, sorry, 115C, general statute, and I see what you're referring to. May provide programs to meet the special scheduling curriculum needs of pregnant and parenting students. And I see how we, because we have in here that we shall provide assistance and support to encourage them to remain enrolled in school and graduate. And so, working with the attendance pieces, the homework, makeup work, and I feel like that last sentence kind of captures that. Homework and makeup work will be made available to ensure they have the opportunity to keep current with assignments and avoid losing course credit because of their absences. And then we also do utilize homebound teachers for pregnant or parenting students. And again, that's always based on that medical determination from their physician on how much time they need to be out, whether it's for the child or in the first 6 weeks that childcare isn't an option.
Could we add a sentence, something to the effect of school officials will use flexible scheduling to make sure that pregnant students, have access to a high quality education, et cetera, et cetera.
And kind of along those lines, another service that we provide, but it really, depends on, the school, I guess. But we do have a partnership and MOU with communities and schools, and they have a, baby, it's not called Baby Fast, but it's young parents or something. I mean, should we mention that we work in conjunction with community partners, to help make that, easy?
So I think we do that. I would be hesitant to put something like that into policy because if it's
Well, I'm not saying say communities and schools, but we do, that we will seek community partnerships as appropriate, or what blah blah blah. I mean, is that?
Yeah, I would say something affirmational, like it is the intention of the school system to ensure that all services that could help a pregnant student are provided, or something to that effect.
And I do think it falls into that sentence, the last sentence in the first paragraph, shall provide
Yep.
assistance and support
Yep.
to encourage they remain enrolled in school. And that does include our community partnerships, our interagency agreements.
Okay.
But I mean, I'm not opposed to adding additional language with, to say community partnerships as available.
Yeah, that's
I just
what I,
think we
that,
should-
that, I think we should put that, because that just encourages, it's just encouraging that, people know that we're not just trying to do it all by ourselves.
Yep, I agree. And then McKenna, if you could just find some language for the flexible scheduling.
Or do you want that in the first or second paragraph?
I think for the I think an additional sentence or something at the bottom. After a home ed
second.
teacher will be assigned, school officials will something in line with 115C.
Okay. And then where do you want to add about the community partnerships?
Well, that would
Toward
make
that-
sense in that first paragraph, the last sentence, right, Julie? Yeah.
I think so. It could be school administrators shall provide assistance and support. And then it could even say to include available community partnerships.
Excellent.
And honestly, with regard to flexible scheduling, that could be added to that last sentence where it says homework and makeup work will be made available. It could be homework, makeup work, and flexible scheduling will be made available.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Farnham. Excellent catch. Okay. If nothing else, anybody going once? Lovely. All right, next up, policy 4040, staff student relations. Ms. Martin? This is a
I
very
don't-
important policy.
Absolutely. I don't necessarily have any responses on this one. Get to my other notes over here.
The only question I did have was the nature of a relationship that began outside of the school system. Would this be something, and I'm pretty sure I'm right on this, but would this be something like a teacher lives next door to a student, like there's a neighborly relationship or some sort of familial connection?
So I'll offer an example on that one. Kid lives next door to me. He waters my plants when I'm out of town, and his mother gave me his cell number so I can text him, to remind him when I think they need to be watered. He's a student at Hanover. And so I don't know him through school. I know him outside of school as my plant waterer.
Okay, yeah, I was really going through this and making sure it was strict enough and I was satisfied, so. Thank
So
you for that, Ms. Barnes.
Can we take a look at paragraph B? B as in boy.
Yes, sir.
And then, so the instant messages will, number 2 is the instant messages will be treated as a form of communications through social media. One of the things that we put into place in my other district was that the only way that employees could communicate with students was through the email of the school, so that we could trace it. We weren't able to, coaches could not call students. They had to do a group email message to their team. And that way everyone was on there, and it was the responsibility of the team to make sure that I said, hey, coach, send an email. And he would say, well, I'll send emails every day at, my emails will post at X time. And so they knew that from the practices, but they were not to do group text. They were not to do, group. You could not communicate other than on the school devices. And that was our way of making sure that we had all records of communication. And it was for the protection of the student and the coaches. So if someone did say, hey, coaches reaching out and saying things that are inappropriate, it's like, nope, you can go back and check our logons. And then they were trying to, at one point the reason why we got away from it is because there were some students who were being bullied because they had done this, it's like some kind of social media platform where the team was, well, the coach wasn't monitoring it. And then the kids were going back and forth with one another, and he was just putting the information out there. And so that caused another issue. So we just went down to the point. So that's what I was looking for, to see if we actually discourage cell phone usage, and if we're telling them they can only talk with them on our devices, meaning the email device that we have prescribed through the school district, because every student has an email address.
Dr. Faust, I had that same concern. When my child was in high school, the coach of communicated with the captains of the team, via text. And it happened, with girls teams and boys teams, that the coach was trying to, use the captains as, team leaders, but a lot of messages would go, to that. And then, and it could be even like, here's about thing, hey, do you want to golf this weekend? Also kind of things, because they became friends. So to me, that was just a license for disaster, with that going on. And especially when we're talking about, when we're getting into the next section, where we're actually, it's the same section, it just goes on forever. In 5C, where it says the communication could reasonably perceived or viewed as solicitation of sexual conduct. Well, the coach is just, let's say, doing something, hey, let's golf. And now that the kid's going, man, he likes me, or she likes me. And so that was the first thing that came to my mind, was that. And maybe they're not doing it anymore. They were doing it in 2000, as late as 2013. So that's a long time ago, but it's such an easy way to communicate via text. So I definitely had that on my mind.
So Dr. Faust, are you recommending something like
I am, that we use the email addresses that the school has provided for our students. We have to take a firm stand because of everything that has happened with our district. And I hate it that it's like, oh, it has to do this, but you never know. And our goal is to make sure that kids are safe at all means, at all costs. And if someone, and I shared, so I had a student group that I used to speak with in my other district, and I was telling them, it's almost like, so I have a 16-year-old. I have no business texting Kennedy's friends. Like that's weird for me to text, like, hey, how you doing? So that's what it actually means when an adult is texting someone else. I said, now if Sherelle, my wife, is texting saying, hey, do this, I said, that's a different light, but I shouldn't be texting her friends. I said, so that's what we have to think about, where it's coming from. You may say, well, the coach is only doing this to let us know where basketball practice is. Well, you know what? We have that email chain that we can actually go back, and if someone has a complaint, then we can pull it off the server and say, this is what was going on. But I am totally against communicating with students via text messaging, via calling them, especially if they're our students. That I don't think we should have any parts of that.
So I actually advocated for something similar because I agree with you. I think, especially given what we've gone through, I can't remember at the time, and maybe somebody on the call can remember, somebody said there was a problem with a zero tolerance policy, in that it was too limiting. I didn't disagree. I disagreed then. I still disagree. But if somebody wanted to make that case before we make that change, I would like to say zero tolerance.
I will tell people now, hey, I'm 46 years old. I played sports. The coach never emailed or texted me anything, and I made it to practice. We just knew what the final word was at the end of the practice. They would tell us, and that's what it was. We didn't need to have that communication back and forth. And I think we just need to put more safeguards up for our students.
Absolutely.
And for our employees.
Well, and I was thinking too, for the employees, so that a kid can't say, make false allegations, or even if a kid makes an allegation, it's like, well, oh man, you go back and, oh, those words weren't good. My bad. Not even my bad, but let's have a little conversation about choosing words. But
So Dr. Frost, what would the language look like? Do you want to pull this and work on it?
I've got
I
a
think-
question. So, and I'm okay either way, but we just may need to clarify in there. So in with Google and the accounts that we create, there is that Google chat, which is texting, but we do archive that as well. So if you don't want to do that, you just want to do email, we just got to make sure when we say, we need to clarify in saying that it's email and not just say using their county provided account, because when you chat somebody, you're also using that email account basically. So I'm okay if we say not to, but that is there. We do archive that, but we'll need to clarify in the language if it is the email only that you're wanting, that you're saying email only.
So this is such a critical policy with staff and student relations, especially for this district and especially during this time. I would really ask that we spend a little bit more time on it, have Ms. Stagner, Dr. Faust, and Ms. Brinson sit down and look at what we really need and how we can get this to where it needs to be.
And I agree with that, Mr. Beaulieu. And I also think that the employee social media policy, that there's a lot of reference in this one, that maybe it would be helpful to look at the two of those together and make sure that they're consistent. And I agree completely about putting really strict guardrails on communication with staff, between staff and students.
I also wanted to, since we're sending it back, look at the item number 4. It is section C under reporting. And item number 4, when it talks about who knows or has reason to believe that a licensed employee has engaged in conduct, I would like to take out licensed and just an employee. I mean, I'm not certain what licensed means, but
So in there, to my understanding, or I would assume when they say license, that we can go after and pull your license. That's one of the things that we put out there to make sure that you will lose your teaching license or.
Sorry, Dr. Faust, that is a requirement for reporting to DPI so that the state can look at the licensure. So if they're, the state doesn't license custodians and bus drivers, and so there's no reporting to deal with their licenses.
well, then could we put licensed and other employees? Because I don't want anybody to get a pass, just because we've spent a lot of time making sure that we know that all employees, any adult that sees it, is required. And so I just didn't want people to somehow get a loophole pass.
This is a requirement for the reporting to the state superintendent and DPI. That office isn't going to accept reports about non-licensed employees. It's so there are other places to report.
Okay.
So you have the criminal reporting, you have reporting to the superintendent or the principal, you have reporting to child protective services if that's appropriate. So this is really limited to those reporting about licensed employees under state board policy.
Okay. All right, that's clear.
And if someone's license have been sanctioned or whatever, there is an area on applications where they have to say yes or no.
Okay. And
All right.
Okay. Was this the policy where it says that and I remember reading it, but I don't have it highlighted on my notes about if we know or thought we knew and we gave a good reference to an employee as they leave us? I mean, is that in this policy or is that someplace else? Because I know I just read it about recently. So if it's not in this one, then let's move on and I'll figure out.
I don't think that's in this one.
Okay.
Actually, I think if you will look up at the first paragraph A, further school system personnel shall provide no assistance to an employee in finding another job. Because
we've sort of had that in our past. So that's it's in there. It's in there, so that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that I couldn't remember what I was reading it if I had a question about it or not, but it's in there.
I also want to point out that I think we have schools using the Remind app for communication. So, just something to think about as we move forward. I'm not advocating for or against it. I don't know all the ins and outs, but I do think we have a fair amount of schools that use that as a communication tool.
a lot.
Okay, so we're gonna pull that one and discuss it next month. Thank you, Dr. Faust. Thank you, McKenna. Thank you, Ms. Stagner. Policy 4050, children of military families. Much of this is required by state and federal law. I had nothing to add. Ms. Farnham?
This one looks good. Let's see. I had just one spelling on page 2 of 4. B, C, deployment. Station on military orders through 6 months after their return instead of though.
Eagle eye.
Thank you. Got one. You know, we should have a policy committee contest. Whoever gets the most misspellings, I don't know, we can get a free coffee or something.
McKenna's good. I haven't found any.
No, because I'm a technical writer, proofreader in one of my little side jobs, and I usually catch that kind of stuff. So yay, Julie, she wins.
Ms. Crable, did you have anything on?
No, I just was amazed at the length of this policy.
Yeah, it's
and all the things that we had to put in. I mean, I'm happy that it's there, but it's just the length of it was kind of surprising.
They're a special group of people. I was glad to be able to leave before my kids came of school age, because it's not easy. All right, age requirements for initial entry. Once again, here I didn't have anything. Ms. Farnham, Ms. Craybill.
I do have a question on A3, and we're looking at, this falls under, of course, a military situation. So if the child did not reach the age of 5 on or before August 31st of that school year, but would be eligible to attend school during that school year in another state, in accordance with the laws and rules of that state, if all the following apply. And then A states, if the child's parent's a legal resident of North Carolina who's an active member of Uniformed Services assigned to a permanent duty station in, and it says another state, but that would be the same state that's mentioned in the top sentence, correct? So I guess my question is, would it say, is it better, as the person who's going to have to implement this, by the way, could we say assigned to a permanent duty station in that other state? So not just another, it's that other state.
So the way I read that was, I read it as a full faith and credit issue, where if the student who is 5 would be moving to the other state, like if the parents were split, the father was stationed somewhere, the mother was still in North Carolina, but the family would be moving in 4 or 5 months, and that student met the requirements for initial entry in the other state. So it could be Fort Drum, New York, Fort Bliss, Texas, that we would allow that student to begin school here, and then that student would likely move on. That was the way I read it. I don't know, Ms. Stagner?
That's assuming they have orders that they're really going to move.
That was sort of my understanding as well, and maybe McKenna can shed some light on that implementation of that particular. I haven't actually dealt with implementing a provision like that.
And so I have an example, if that would help. But just my question is really about whether it's any other state or if it's the same state we're talking about. So for example, let's say the child does not reach the age of 5 on or before August 31st, which is a North Carolina requirement, but the child lives with dad or mom, just it's one parent though, because that's also a part of this. So lives with dad in their state, dad stationed in Alabama as a permanent duty station, but is a legal resident of North Carolina, and then dad is going to be deployed to some other location, and dad's he's the sole legal custodian of the student, And so we're really not talking about any other state other than Alabama, because that's the duty station. So if you look at it, yes, the kid was with the dad in Alabama, and was going to be able to start kindergarten there. And this is about, whether they did or didn't, would be eligible to attend school in that school year, and then moves here, but isn't of our age because they expected to be in school in Alabama. We would then consider that to be appropriate, but it's really about that same state. It's not any other state. So my concern is implementing the policy and narrowing it down to the particular state that they were residing in, that the permanent duty station is in. And I may be so far in the weeds that we don't even need to talk about this anymore.
So I think what you're saying, like practically speaking, makes a lot of sense. And I would assume that that's what they intended. The language comes directly from state statute, and that's just how the state statute is worded. But it would seem like how you're describing that situation was probably their intent, but this is just the language in the statute.
Okay, then let's just disregard everything I said. I'll understand the only question is because I have to implement it. And I'm not going to use all other states. I'm going to use that same one.
Right.
Thank you.
And they're probably only going to be requesting it if they're coming from a place where they were expecting to go to school there. So.
Right.
All right. 4,100 books. Have you ever dealt with a situation like that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Billier, I had a question about the last part of that policy about a homeless student. And it says that this is a policy about initial entry to school. But the policy says in the very last paragraph, the school officials shall work blah, 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 to obtain relevant enrollment records or other information needed for enrollment. Let's see. And it was a question. I was just wondering about whether it be, enrollment information from another district, and maybe I'm thinking about a different policy. Enrollment records, I was just confused whether that, not articulating this very well. It's getting to be.
No, I think I understand what you're saying is why would we have enrollment records for an initial entry student?
They wouldn't have come from another school. So that was.
So you want to just strike
enrollment? Shall immediately contact the last school the student attended to obtain relevant enrollment records. So if there was no other prior school, if this was initial entry, so that was the. Do we need or do we ask for pre-K records?
That was going to be my comment. If they were enrolled in a pre-K or in a particular place where there might have been universal preschool, then we would definitely want those records, especially if this is a situation where the parent has no other access to records, then we would definitely want to make contact with the prior school if there was one. But I think it would only apply to preschool.
So one question I had as I was reading this one, there's another policy that we had before us. This one says a child reaches or reached the age of 5 on or before August the 31st. And another policy that we were reading today, and I was trying to thumb through to find it real quick, about it references the age of 7, having not started school, or it was something, here it is, where it says, it's in the attendance policy. Regular attendance by every student is mandatory. The state, North Carolina, requires every kid in the state between the ages of 7 and 16 to attend school. So that might be where a kid did attend and somewhere else, and it's still initial for us because we're saying they didn't have to enroll until they were 7.
7 is the age of compulsory attendance under state law. So it doesn't, that's not necessarily initial entry. That's just the compulsory attendance.
But it could be the initial, right? Because if I'm not required, then I, as a parent, may say, I'm not going to school till they're 7. right? And
Yes.
okay. So there might be other records somewhere, just because it's not, the initial entry may not be the initial entry for us. They may have another school they've been to. Just a point. Move on.
Okay, 4100, if there's nothing else, thank you. It
Oh,
is.
I did have one question about that. So are we, number 2B says that we allow children at the age of 4 to go to kindergarten? A child reached the age of 4 on and before July 16th and presented for enrollment first month. So did I read that right? That if a 4-year-old child to be an extraordinary measure, can go to kindergarten?
Yes, and we have to follow, as the last sentence states, we follow the guidelines established by the State Board of Education for early entry into kindergarten.
Okay, so that's a thing.
It is.
Just side note, do we invoke that very often?
Yeah.
Okay. FYI for me.
Okay, it is currently 11:55. By my count, we have 21 policies that we have yet to get to. So my recommendation, McKenna, would be to table these policies. I wouldn't send us any more for the next month. I think with the remaining policies that we have to discuss, I know some board members would like to go back and get a few that we've already updated or that we're going to update soon. So I think we have enough to get through another meeting. I imagine we'll have close to 30. So I would recommend we table those until our next policy committee meeting on the second Tuesday of next month. And at this time.
Nelson, can I make a recommendation real quick?
Sure.
All right, so I know that we're we got 5 minutes left, and I don't know how long this will take, but I would really like for us to have just a quick review and possibly get it going. Number 4720, survey of students, because the Title IX committee is talking about releasing a survey or getting our survey up to date. And I would like to have a policy in the works that we can get a policy out. I mean, not a policy, we can get a survey out. It's 4720, survey of students. It was the very last one on our list.
Yeah, I looked at that. Let's see, we don't need to pass, we're still governed by our old policy. So, we don't need to pass anything in order to get a survey. I don't know, I didn't see, I did have a question about the parental involvement, the administration of surveys by third parties, arrangements to protect student privacy, and the administration of surveys containing a protected topic. I was curious as to how that might impact any potential Title IX survey. My recommendation would be we'll have a policy committee meeting before the next Title IX meeting. So it'll be in the works.
Okay.
And then I'd really like to see what they put forward before we.
Well, I guess some of the things I'm looking at is in letter A, the protected topics, where it says, surveys about Department of Education funded surveys. So I don't think that our survey for Title IX would be considered a Department of Education funded survey. But some of the top,
it wouldn't. No, it wouldn't.
It would not. But they listed, like things like sexual behavior and attitudes, and and that's one of the questions that is, in direct discussion right now.
So when the Department of Education funds a survey, there are certain things that you're not allowed to talk about. There are certain things that they're going to stipulate that you can't, but it doesn't mean that a third party, the school system itself, couldn't ask different questions.
Right. So I guess that's what my question was.
Yeah. It was like, if you want to think of an analogy, think of the Hyde Amendment, where, if you're spending federal money, you can't use it to talk about abortion, advocate for abortion, et cetera, et cetera. So when the Department of Education says we're going to pay for the survey, well, there are certain stipulations that come with
I think this also talks about required participation in surveys. And I think that the survey that the Title IX committee is talking about is going to be a purely voluntary survey. So that's a distinction as well.
Okay, because when we get down to, all right, I'll hold off on it, but the last sentence said the school system will notify parents at the beginning of each school year of specific or approximate dates of administration or surveys concerning protected topics that are not funded in whole or in part by the Department of Education. So we're talking about a not funded in whole, at all. And are we saying that we want to notify parents at the beginning of the school year? I mean, that means we can't have a survey until September if we have to notify people. Was just trying to think ahead, because that's to calm some, chatter that might be occurring.
Is this a survey that we would want to give online versus student in their seat?
Either way, according to some of the experts on our committee, the survey would be fine to be taken online, and be fine to be taken in at their home and not in school. But it could be given at school if we were in school.
I just, after writing a dissertation, I think about the validity of the and it's not going to be, and I know this would be policy, I guess, when we're talking about an anonymous.
Anonymous
it can't
survey.
be anonymous if they ask that specific question.
Yeah, and
because
I think
we are a reporting agency, and so if it puts that on there, then we have to report, and so we would know who. Because when it went back to those license and those types of things, that's where, like, if I don't report, my license can be sanctioned.
Okay, so let's table that, because
I guess, yeah. I think what I'd recommend is let's look at a survey. I mean, if it needs to go out, we'll figure out how to put everything together after we look at
that, because all those discussions, Dr. Faust, you weren't a part of, and we need to update you or just ask your opinion. So take that. Never mind.
Okay.
So at this time, I will entertain a motion and get ready for it, because I'm going to go one by one, to move policies 4100, 4050, 4023, 4005, 4003, 4001, 4000, 4370, 4362, 4353, 4352, 4351, 4345, 4334, 4316, and 4300 forward to the New Hanover County Board of Education to be placed on the agenda for first reading at the February monthly meeting. Is there a motion?
Didn't we talk about 2300 too?
Yes, but we aren't taking action on it.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
We didn't change it.
I'll move to approve that long list. As
And
read.
I will second. Ms. Crable, how do you vote?
Yes.
I will vote yes. I thank everybody for their time and efforts this morning as I call for a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion?
To adjourn.
I second. Ms. Crable, how do you vote?
Aye.
And I will vote aye as well. The policy committee is adjourned. I wish everybody a pleasant Tuesday and a good rest of the week. And we will see most of you, if not all of you, tomorrow. Thank you guys very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Sorry.